Hey guys, something a little bit different today. I've compiled all the best malicious compliance stories. If you like this compilation style of video, let me know. That said, our first story of the day is by Rainier Cherries. Supervisor asks student with cancer to turn on their camera during a virtual meeting, and you won't believe what happens next. Clickbaity article titles aside, it's a long one. It happened 2 days ago and I'm still giddy. There's 2 important background things to know for the story. 1, I was diagnosed with a rare ovarian cancer at the beginning of the year. I had surgery and some chemo and I'm mostly recovered now. I still have to go in for frequent testing and occasional monitoring. I'm a private person to the extent that I've dated people for years without telling my parents, so you best believe random coworkers and bosses are unaware of my medical history. 2, I attended a university that has an ambassador program. Basically, if you have a high enough GPA, you're able to interview for the program, and if you get in, they pay for your tuition during the time you're an ambassador. In exchange, you work 5 hours a week and work graduation and other events. I'm one of those ambassadors. This is my story. Law and Order sound effect. Dun dun. My supervisor for the ambassador program, Miss M, has spent the majority of our time together belittling me. As I sit here about to type about her, I find myself already exasperated thinking about reliving some of the details, so I'll be short and sweet for both your sake and mine. She follows every rule to the letter and leaves no room for collaboration or discussion. As an example, we use Microsoft Teams for communication, and she has us clock in and out in a group of 20 people by saying, "I'm here" and "I'm leaving." So every day you have to scroll through dozens of messages to find anything of import, and listen to notification sounds every time someone so much as takes a lunch break. I suggested using the time clock function on Teams and even offered to set it up for us, and was told that I was deliberately undermining her position. Another quick example is her vehemence when I told her I didn't have any social media to advertise the college. She was certain I was lying and went so far as to ask the other ambassadors to try and find me. They didn't. There's nothing to find. Crazy concept. I've challenged her at a couple of junctures, but ultimately realized I was fighting a losing battle, and I'd be better off keeping my head down. Laughs in dramatic irony. Fast forward to 4 days ago, Friday, there's a mandatory virtual event in 3 days, Monday, where the dean of the college would talk to the ambassadors as well as livestream the event to the college's website and YouTube page. Miss M sent out a message that I'll copy and paste here because the formatting is so dramatic that it makes me chuckle. Students must have their cameras on and phones off. Repeat, phones off, cameras on. Like, come on lady, bold, caps, or italics. Your email almost gave me a stroke. I follow up the same day saying, "Miss M, unfortunately I'll be at a doctor's appointment at this time and will be unable to turn my camera on during the event." No response. I sent another email to follow up. No response. The day of the event rolls around. I direct message her through Microsoft Teams 10 minutes before. I see that she's seen the message with a red receipt. Nothing. Okay, video chat starts and several students join the session with their cameras on. Then the dean. He gets halfway through introducing himself and Miss M interrupts him as he takes a brief pause and says, "Excuse me, could we please have all of the students turn their cameras on?" I say nothing, but put a quick message I already had typed in anticipation in the group chat. "Miss M, I have a private situation that bars me from turning on my camera. I've contacted you individually. Not but a few seconds after I send it, I get called out by name and I respond audibly, 'Miss M, I cannot turn on my camera at this time.' And she responds, 'Expectations were clear and you were told multiple times about this. Every other student here managed to do it and I expect the same out of you.'" Now, one of the cool things about having cancer is you become very familiar with the hospital staff. And if you're lucky, they're fun to talk to. During COVID, my nurses were my tethers to sanity because no one could visit me while I had inpatient infusions. So I told one of my nurses, Amy, about this situation beforehand. She joked that if I was told to turn my camera on, I should really play up my illness. In any other situation, I would have been entirely opposed. But sweet revenge was in sight. When I replay it in my head, I imagine that anime fist clenching thing when the protagonist resolves to get revenge. I set my laptop back a bit further from myself on my legs so you could see the entirety of me in my hospital regalia. Teams will display the person currently talking as the largest image in chat. Everyone had their audio off except me, the dean, and Miss M. So when I turned my camera on, I was displayed as the EKG loudly thrummed away on max volume thanks to Amy. Silence. I say, I asked Miss M through email and Teams if I could opt out of having my camera on, but she insisted. I waited a beat to see if anyone would say anything and then continued with my special vocal blend of melodramatic gratitude and illness-laden shakiness. Virtual engagement is so important for this new era of learning. I can see why having the camera on is important, though I was hoping I might be granted an exception. The dean says, OP, you're more than welcome to turn your camera off. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding. I say thank you so much for making a special exception for me. It's been a difficult week, but I feel grateful to be here. Then, 2 people leave the call. One was Miss M, and the other was Anthony, who is Miss M's boss. I didn't know he'd be there. Haven't heard from either of them yet, but I'm awaiting a follow-up with anticipation. I'm typing this from the hospital and feeling gratitude for a lot of things. 'Tis the season after all. I'm here, I'm alive, and above all, this stupid disease won't stop me from putting a bully in their gosh darn place. If you found yourself in such a sensitive position like OP is here, and somebody is not realizing the situation at hand, would you be willing to go forward with something like that about yourself, just to put them in their place in front of everybody like that? Or would you rather just get yelled at or whatever with your camera off and explain afterwards? Let me know what you would do in the comments down below. Our next story is by Cran. As per my NDA, I'm not allowed to discuss this position with former employers. Since my firing is effective immediately, you're now a former employer. Gather round as I tell you the story of the time I got fired at the worst place I've ever worked. From day one, it was a nightmare. There was zero onboarding or training. I was simply given the login info for a couple of different websites and told to get to work. This company planned large conferences and I was in charge of speaker coordination. I was the only person in this role. The information solely resided with me. Not a big deal, I say to myself. I'm good at thinking on my feet. I'll just ask questions when I need clarification on something. That turned out to be impossible. My manager's first language wasn't English. I'm all for learning new languages. I think it's a great skill to have and it takes a lot of work. And being able to speak multiple languages is impressive. The problem was that her English was so poor that it was very often hard to understand what she was trying to say. I once asked if she had time to hop on a call and explain something to me, and she responded with, "No, OP, self skills is a must. I am bird without head." It took me a few days to find out what she was trying to say was that things are hectic. She was running around like a chicken with its head cut off, and she needed me to be self-sufficient. Regardless, I did my best in the position. Small mistakes happened here and there, but overall, all the speakers were very happy and felt well supported. I struggled on the communication with my manager, but I thought the company was happy with my work. Until 4 months in, when I was randomly pulled into a meeting with my manager, HR, and legal. Effective immediately, I was fired. I asked why I was being fired, and why was this the first I'd heard of any problems? Why wasn't there a write-up or a verbal warning? My manager said it was because the 10 minutes, I ran the analytics, it takes me to respond to an email was too slow. That was a BS reason and we all knew it. If you don't like me personally, fine. But don't try to make this seem like I was a bad employee. To be honest, I was furious. We do the exit interview with HR, and then she asks me to send over any documents I had. We worked on personal computers remotely and describe where I was at in regards to our next event and our speakers. NDAs are really common in this field. I've signed one at every job I've ever worked. But this employer's NDA had a clause in it that worked to my advantage. I said, as per my NDA, I'm not to discuss intimate details or share documents relating to this position with any employer, past or future. Since this firing was effective immediately, you're now a former employer and I'm bound by my NDA. HR hem and hawed a little bit, telling me that of course I could speak to them about it. This was about their event. I pulled out my copy of the NDA, always save contracts, and pointed out the exact clause and said that it clearly stated that if I violated this NDA, I would be sued. So no, I couldn't talk to them about the position. HR turned to legal, and legal pointed out that I was technically correct. They were a former employer, and I was bound by my NDA. They fired me 17 days before the event. They didn't have time to start over from scratch. I still keep in contact with some of my coworkers, and apparently the event was a crap show, and the manager nearly lost her job because of it. Over half the speakers pulled out once communication broke down. All because I take too long to respond to emails. Honestly, I think what I'm struggling with is what the actual reason was. They just didn't like OP? Was it the communication barrier? Did OP ask for too much help? Overall, it seems just dysfunctional from top to bottom. Something good to note though, if somebody fires you effective immediately, you don't have to stick around and answer their questions. If somebody fires you effective immediately and then asks for all the information you left behind, you can tell them that you're doing some consultation services and they can pay up if they want that information. You can't tell me that I'm out of a job and I'm not employed with you anymore and expect me to just be like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. Anyways, what I did before I got fired was this, this, and this. I would be like, oh, you jerks, okay, I see how it is. See you later. And our final story of the day is by Suki5Buki. HR tries to gaslight me and screw me. They end up bending over backwards. I work for a multinational consulting company. I just recently finished my engineering degree, and since I was already working there as an intern, when they offered me a full-time job, I figured I'd accept it while I looked for another job that I would enjoy more. The project I was in was a complete crap show. The client was always angry at us because we were late on our deliveries constantly. The project leader was a good guy but didn't have a clue about what us pawns were doing on a daily basis and would chew everyone out whenever things didn't go as he planned. And the project itself was boring as heck. So there really wasn't any challenge or opportunity for learning anything valuable. To top it off, while most of my coworkers were cool guys, some of them were slackers that just try to do the absolute minimum, and oftentimes not even that, which usually meant more work for me. There was a huge amount of turnover too, so high that I was one of the vets, despite having been there for only 6 months. So the project never really felt to be getting any traction. To be fair though, they always treated me well and with respect, so nothing to complain on a personal level. After 2 months with my new contract in that sucky project, I finally found a job at another company that I really liked. Salary and other benefits were far better than what I had at the moment, and the project was much more interesting. I passed all the interviews with flying colors, and they offered me the job starting the following month. Great! In my country, you usually need to give a 15-day notice before leaving your current job, or you risk facing penalties. Now, it was my first time switching jobs, so I called HR to confirm this, and they did. It's also relevant that once you put in your leave notice, the company can actually let you go whenever they want before the 15 days are over. This meant that if I would have told them right then that I was leaving next month, they easily could have let me go the next day, and I would have been left without a job for the entire month. With all this information, I decided to wait a couple of weeks before putting in my leave notice. About 17 days before the starting date at my new job, so I could at least guarantee myself half a month's salary. The day comes in, and I talk to HR to put in my notice. They're very polite, trying to convince me to stay, but give up when I tell them what my new conditions will be. Then the conversation goes as follows. They say, alright then, we'll process your leave request, your last day being the 1st of October. You'll be deducted 6 days of salary. I say, wait, what? Why? They say, oh, you need to give us notice of 15 labor days before leaving. It's company policy. I say, but I literally talked to you a couple weeks ago, and you never specified that they had to be labor days. We always talked about natural days. They say, I doubt that, it's always been labor days, not natural days. This exchange goes on for a bit, and I start having the feeling that he's gaslighting me. So I try to think of another solution. I say, I still have 6 vacation days left over. Can't I just take those right after I leave? They say, no, sorry, can't do. Company policy. So here I am, thinking these duplicitous, gaslighting, unhelpful Tobies at HR have got me by the balls. The only thing he does is remind me that company policy is set in stone. Finally, I tell them that I'll look into my options and call back. I started going through my contract to see if I could do anything about this, and I gotta say, I struck gold. The contract I signed was a regular indefinite time contract. However, the first 3 months of it were probatory, which meant that the company could terminate it at any time without repercussions for any reason. I looked it up on Google, and I confirmed my suspicions. The same were true for the employee. It had only been 2 months since I signed, so I could leave whenever I wanted, no notice needed at all. With the biggest poop-eating grin I could muster, I call HR back. "Hey, it's me, OP, calling you back about my leave notice. I just read my contract, and since I'm still on probatory period, I take it I can leave whenever I want, no penalties whatsoever. Like, for instance, right now at 12:39 in the afternoon. Is that correct?" Silence for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. HR says, "I guess we can probably arrange it for you to leave right before the 1st of October, if you wish." No crap. That's really just how you have to handle people that are like, the contract says what the contract says. It's company policy. Those are the times you go deep diving into that big wall of text to find out A, if they're telling the truth, and B, if you can weasel out of it somehow. Sometimes it pays off big time, like how OP figured it out here. Project manager doesn't want to see the client. Project manager has to see the client anyway. Long ago, I had this project manager, Richard for obvious reasons, who was quite a character. The project we were working on was, to be very honest, a crap show. Tiny mom and pop company hired to take on a massive project with a big multinational engineering/construction firm. We had a huge team of 3 engineers and a rotating cast of project managers who typically didn't last more than a few months before either their contracts were renewed, Big Boss decided they were too expensive, or they simply weren't up to the task. Anyway, we were expected to produce copious amounts of paperwork, from project schedules, engineering manuals, engineering data sheets, drawings, schematics, etc. The team was awesome. We got along well, we worked hard. However, there really was only so much we could do, and we were inexperienced dealing with huge projects, or the standards that multinational megacorps typically enforce with their paperwork. So that led to a lot of documents being returned with lots of comments, lots of recycle time, lots of frustration on both the clients and our side, and a lot of nasty language. Still, my colleagues and I learned a lot during this time, all 3 of us fresh from university. And to give due credit to the client, once we'd gotten to know some of their team and shared our situation with them, a few of their engineers were kind enough to spend many hours literally tutoring us on various things. I spent a whole week, 9 to 5, every day with one guy in particular who taught me how to draw P and ID diagrams professionally. One particular day, we got a call from the client asking the team to go attend a mediation/expediting session. Basically, go listen to the client cuss you out. We had this pretty often, like once or twice a month. So Richard decided he simply didn't want to go to this particular meeting. He said, "I'm not going. If you want to go on your own." I called the client to decline the meeting, only to get cussed out and told in no uncertain terms to attend the meeting. Mentioned me and Richard by name, or else there'd be heck to pay. Big Boss sighs and says, "Just go." I consult Richard again, asking him what to tell the client. He said, I quote, "I don't care, tell them whatever you want," then kicks his feet up on the table, pulls out a newspaper and starts reading it. Dumbfounded, I left his room and went back to my desk seething. Next morning, I turn up to the client's office alone, get ushered into a big meeting room, and sat down in front of 8 people, 4 of whom I knew as the regulars we dealt with, and the rest were introduced to me as senior GMs and a manager from the end user company. Boy, oh boy, me, a lowly lowest of the low peon, versus 4 mid-level bosses and 4 endgame bosses at the same time. Granted, they were professional when giving me a good earful about our company's abysmal performance, and then they asked the golden question, "Why are you here alone? Where's your project manager to address these concerns?" Cue malicious compliance. My project manager declined to attend the meeting. They ask why. Richard said he doesn't care and for me to tell you anything I like. The meeting ended shortly after that. But wait, there's more. The 4 regulars then dragged me into another meeting room, giving me a god-awful verbal lashing and cussing me out for another hour. Then, one out of the 4, an expediter named Joe, who had stayed silent throughout the second meeting, dragged me off to another meeting room where I got cussed out again for another half hour over, "Why do you let client project team," the other 3 guys, "verbally abuse you during almost every meeting like this? You should walk out or decline to attend when it gets abusive." Saying this whilst cussing me out. Crawling back to my own office, I retold the events to my big boss. Richard had taken the rest of the day off. He just sighed and told me to go back to work. That same afternoon, a nasty Graham came in requesting for another meeting the next morning, this time with a demand for my project manager's mandatory attendance. I forwarded it to my big boss, who then called Richard and voluntold him to attend. Richard then called me and angrily insisted I attend with him, then hung up before I could answer. Okay, fine then. Cue second dose of malicious compliance. The next morning, I called in sick, texted Richard, and stayed home. Shortly after the meeting started, Joe calls me to ask why I wasn't present, to which I replied, "You told me yesterday to walk out or decline if things get abusive. I thought today's meeting likely wouldn't be very amiable, so per your advice, I've declined to attend." Joe simply laughed and said, "Fair enough." Richard got cussed out by the client for well over 2 hours that morning. 2 glorious hours during which I lay in bed. 2 weeks later, Richard got replaced by a new project manager who was much better and lasted till the end of the project. When faced with situations like these where you're kind of the lowly guy getting pulled around, maybe kind of abusively yelled at by these customers or project managers or anything, are you the kind of person that goes with the flow and allows people to kind of, whether you hate to admit it or not, kind of walk over you a little bit? Or in a situation like this, would you be a bit more confrontational or not be too afraid to talk back? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Fat's Cat Too Fat. I should have read the lease? Well, you should have read the law. Reading Suki Suki 5 Buki's epic example of malicious compliance ending their employment contract, I was reminded how I got out of an apartment lease several years ago. It was coming up on renewal time, and my landlord had just sent renewal paperwork with a big rent increase. Knowing I could find a cheaper place nearby, I sent in my written notice to vacate, which was required 60 days before my move-out date. The landlord rejected my notice and told me that if I'd read the lease, I would know that notice to vacate was required 60 days before the first day of the month that I wanted to move out, not 60 days before the move-out day itself. As a result, they were going to force me to submit a new notice the following month and pay an extra month's rent at the new higher rate. I was offended by their attitude, but accepted that they had won, at least until I checked out the lease against local rental law. While they were right about the required date of my notice to vacate, they had failed to send me notice of rent increase on time, because I was supposed to have a minimum of 2 weeks after receiving their notice of rent increase to put in my notice to leave at the end of my original lease term. I wrote back to them with a screenshot of the relevant city law and said, while you're correct about the due date of my notice to vacate, you also failed to send me timely notice of rent increase. You can't require me to send you notice to vacate at the end of my lease term before knowing how much you'll be raising rent. So how do you plan to remedy your breach of the lease? After what must have been a tense call with their lawyer, my landlord agreed to accept my original notice and let me move out on the day I planned. Since I'd already paid my last month's rent, they never got another cent from me. You gotta love that the landlord comes off all high and mighty, touting this regulation and that law and this lease agreement, while they themselves very blatantly violating it to try and get extra money out of you and extort you, more or less. The thing to note is when you're faced in a situation like this, Take the time to read that contract and look up the laws relating to whatever it is. You might just find something that totally saves your hiney. Our next story is by Responsible Lad 2361. Marked down for not using a program that's glitched and unusable? Okay, enjoy my solution. I worked at an awful insurance company years ago and can honestly say it was the worst experience of my life. I have a couple of stories of doing what I could to get back at management though. I worked in service and we were supposed to use a program that automatically estimated how many miles a person drove per year. The catch, though, is this program was always glitched and was always down, so you couldn't use it. One day, I had a call that was being monitored by a supervisor and I needed to estimate mileage. Of course, the program itself was down and unusable, so I put in an estimate for the numbers that were typical of the area. I got graded an F for the call, or whatever the metrics were. It's been a while, so I don't remember the exact details. I had my direct supervisor talk to me about the call with the whole, "What can we do to avoid this in the future?" lecture. I told him the score was BS and needed to be changed immediately since the app was down and completely unusable. He said there wasn't anything he could do and that the F would stand. Whatever, no big deal. I knew it was typical company BS, so I forgot about it and moved on. Until my former supervisor called to ream me out. This monster had recently been transferred out of state and was no longer my boss, but for some reason took it upon herself to call me anyways and explode on me about how it was unacceptable to not be using the mileage estimation program and how I wouldn't be working there much longer if I didn't shape up. At this point, I had had enough of the company and didn't care anymore. I explained how the app was literally down and not a single person could use it and how the score on my call was BS and needed to be changed immediately. She didn't care for silly things like common sense and demanded that I send her an action plan detailing how I would ensure this would never happen again. Cue malicious compliance. I knew I had received an F on the call because the program I was supposed to use was glitched, down, and unusable. Only management could fix that. So my action plan was very simple. Each and every morning I would send my supervisor an email asking her what she was doing to assure that glitches in the app were fixed and it never crashed again. Of course, my action plan stated that since she personally took time out of her busy schedule to contact me, I understood how immensely important this was, so I would be typing up this action plan and sending it to her daily until the program was fixed. For the next month, I would clock in, put my phone on hold so that I couldn't take incoming calls, and spend the next 10 to 15 minutes typing the action plan fresh and sending it to her. A second part of my action plan said something along the lines of this. Former supervisor has made it abundantly clear how important communication on this issue is. Therefore, I will send no less than 5 follow-through emails each day until said issue is resolved. So 5 times a day, I'd put my phone on hold so I couldn't receive incoming calls, and spend 5 to 10 minutes typing the email fresh and sending it to her. She responded multiple times telling me to stop, but I simply responded, "Per our previous talk, I understand how important this is to the company, and per your previous request to create an action plan, I will continue to do so until the program is fixed. After all, I want to ensure that I'm always using the required programs and never get graded an F in a call again." I kept this up for my last month with the company, during which I turned into Peter Gibbons from Office Space and completely and totally stopped caring about everything. Honestly, I think despite OP going and sending a bunch of emails daily to this person, inquiring about whether or not the program's going to get fixed, they still kind of took the high road on this one. There was definitely multiple avenues they could have taken that would probably be way more effective. The downside is the customer would probably suffer, because it would probably be pretty easy for a customer to be on the phone and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it looks like the required program is down. I can't help you any further. Please log a complaint and I'll forward it to so-and-so until we can get this fixed. Sorry," something like that. It would probably get OP in trouble more, but it would be pretty darn effective and telling, right? And our final story of the day is by Idrian. You want to grouse about the fan? Okay. I've been living with someone who has a few control issues. First, let me tell you that I've been eating a relatively high fiber diet, and on top of that, I need to take extra iron supplements, both of which make for extra pungent movements. The closest bathroom to my room is right next to a very common area. In this bathroom, there's a timed bathroom vent fan with times of 5, 15, and 30-minute increments. So I had laid a massive egg in the bathroom, and I set it for 30 minutes. I was told by said person that 30 minutes was too long and 5 minutes would suffice. I tested this when said person was not home, and this was incorrect, as the aroma still wafted gently into the common area. So I just stopped bothering with the fan at all. You know, I don't think there's going to be too much of a greater incentive to renegotiate what's okay with the bathroom vent timer than having to go a certain amount of time in Eggland. That said though, they do make these products that are called like one drop or just a drop or something like that, where what you do is you put one drop in the toilet and apparently that's all it takes to just completely deodorize it. To be fair, I haven't actually tried it, but apparently I hear it works really well. So if that situation with that roommate or partner or whatever is salvageable, maybe that could help. You want me to push the pallet all the way in? Okay. Background, this happened earlier today at the grocery store that I work at. I work in the produce area, and when we're done with our boxes, we take them to the box crusher. And then when that's full, it has to be tied up and put on a pallet to be sent back on one of the trucks we get. We call this a bale for future reference. When I went down there to crush my boxes, the machine was full, so I had to empty it. Me and a couple other coworkers finished tying up the bale, and I grabbed the electric-powered pallet jack, since it's easier to use for something as heavy as a bale, and pick up the bale to put it on the truck. Now, since it's the weekend before Thanksgiving, the store's busy as heck, and because of this, there were some grocery pallets on the truck still. Most were on the right side, but there was still one pallet on the left, the side I was putting the bale on. One of the people who helped me tie the bale, we'll call him Tim, says to put it in front of the pallet on the left, and he'll deal with it later. I say okay and put it there. Now another guy, we'll call him Derek, comes up to me after I put this bale on the truck and says that I can't put it there since it's blocking the one pallet of stuff, and that I need to take the bale back off, move the grocery stuff out, and then put the bale back on again. I tell them that Tim said to do it like that, and he basically says that he doesn't care, and that I need to redo it. A little annoying, but whatever. I start to rearrange things to his liking while using the electric power jack. He asks if I've been certified to operate the power jack. You need to be certified to be allowed to use it, and I say in a very passive-aggressive manner, yes, I have been, thank you. Now I move the things around, and I'm putting the bale back in the truck on the left. I try to go the whole way down, but I can't. Some product on the pallet on the right is leaning over a bit, which wouldn't be an issue by itself normally, but there were pallets against the left wall of the trailer, so there was barely not enough room to go all the way back. If I try to force it, then something will fall over and it'll be more annoying to deal with, and I know this. I think to myself, well, it's only like 2 pallet spaces to go. It should be fine where it is now. But apparently Derek didn't think that way. He says, "You just gonna leave it there?" I say, "Yeah." He says, "Don't just leave it there, push it all the way back." I say, "You want me to push it all the way back?" He aggressively says, "Yes, push it back." I say, "Okay." I lift the bale up and, without any regard for what will happen, I push it the rest of the way in with the power jack. The pallets on the wall get knocked down and pushed back, so now they can't get them if needed. Derek comes up to me and says, "Now see, that's what I didn't want to happen." I look at him and say, "I just did what you asked me to do. You wanted me to push it in, I pushed it in." He gets visibly angry and says something that I didn't listen to because I just walked away to finish crushing my boxes. As I finish my boxes, I see him taking the bale out and stacking the pallets on top of it. He looks at me and says, "Would that have been so hard?" I say back to him, "You told me to push it in, not take it out and stack pallets on it. I did exactly what you asked me to do. I don't know why you're so angry." After that, he just walks away in a clearly angry mood, and I walk back to my area, grinning. If you found yourself in a similar situation, would you stick to your guns and be unrelenting that all you did was follow their exact instructions that they aggressively told you to do? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Greeny Epi. Okay, have fun juggling your shopping. I used to work at a supermarket, and at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, the following went down. I say, "Good morning, would you like a bag?" The customer sarcastically says, "No, I'm going to carry all of these by themselves." It may have been the underpay, the rude tone, or the fact that I was just so tired of the customers being nasty, but I decided to go along with it. Me beaming says, "Okay, sir, no problem." I then proceeded to scan all of his shopping and charge him. The man paid and stood there blankly staring at his groceries for a moment before looking at me. He says, "Where are my bags?" I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I thought you said you were going to carry them." The customer angrily says, "Well, obviously I can't carry all of this without a bag." I say, "Oh, okay, well, in that case." I then proceed to go through the usual single-use or reusable bag spiel, and then, wouldn't you know it, we were out of the bags he wanted, so I had to call the manager over to bring some more bags to me, which always took ages in the supermarket. The customer then had to dig out his wallet and card to pay a tiny amount for some bags, and then I handed them to him with a smile and receipt, and watched while he bagged his own groceries, scowling the whole time. Normally I would scan and bag, but as he didn't want bags to start with, I didn't offer, and he didn't ask. All in all, a 5-minute transaction took a good 15 minutes, and he never pulled that with me again. I have no idea what he thought would happen while he watched me scan everything and pile it up in a very obviously non-bagged heap, but hey, he said no bags. I've had plenty of an adult say something along the lines of, "Say what you mean, ask what you want. Don't mess around too much when you clearly want one thing." To be totally fair with OP, I feel like this is another one of those things where a customer walks up with a piece of clothing, it doesn't have the tag on it, and they go, "Oh, must be free then." It's one of those things that you hear it so often and everybody thinks they're so funny for coming up with it, and it slowly just takes years off of your life every successive time you hear it. Our next story is by Dominatrix. Got compliance for being a smart butt. The history of art exam had a very curious question. What's the name of the artist that said the perfect anatomical proportions are 8 head measures? Referring to total body height versus head proportions. 7 or 8, I don't remember. Shoot, what's his name? Wait, that's pretty vague. The exam didn't ask for the first or most prominent artist. So I write down, me. Freaking genius, right? Well, I receive back the exam graded with the answer wrong. I go with the teacher and try to weasel my way into a correct answer. It clearly doesn't say that the artist must be famous or the first to say so, and I consider myself quite an artist, so this should qualify, right? They say, "Yeah, but I asked for the name of the artist and you only wrote me. Had you written your name, it would be right." She got me. She got me good. For some reason, this story made me think of all those images that pop up on Twitter of a kid's booklet question with some ridiculous answer. I think I saw one recently that was write down what you learned from these questions or something. And the kid wrote, "I didn't learn anything at all, I'm already smart," with a few misspellings in there. I mean, to be fair, it was the right answer. You can't say, "No, that's not right." Our next story is by TalonCard815, a town's compliance with one pain in the butt. Not mine, but I get to live with it. The road the local high school is on has a ton of 4-way stop signs. A resident decided that he wanted a traffic light at the entrance of the high school instead of a 4-way stop sign. This guy went to town meetings every time for over a year, posting to social media, etc., etc. Finally, the town got sick of him and gave him what he wanted, or so he thought. Now, the town's malicious compliance, the traffic light was installed and programmed to be red in all directions until a car trips the sensors. You still have to stop every time for the light unless there happens to be a car already waiting, but the light is rarely green long enough for more than one car to get through unless it's right behind the first car. I mean, I don't really know what this guy expected. Were they expecting this to go from a 4-way stop sign to a high-speed intersection right in front of this high school? Surely the traffic was going to be kind of limited regardless. Now, what they probably should have asked for is a roundabout. That would have actually allowed traffic to just keep continuously moving. This next story is by eGranto3. Hey boss lady, he chose to do the thing the hard way. This happened to my brother-in-law, but I love this story so much, so you're getting it. My brother-in-law was in the army for a while back in the mid to late 90s through to the early 2000s. He worked in health services. He was one among a handful of people that were charged with notifying new recruits of the results of their HIV/STD testing. His boss is quite high ranking, but I don't know which rank. I do know that there were only a dozen or so people at or above her rank, and because she was in charge of the hospital/medical services, she had 100% authority to tell anyone on base to go truck themselves if it meant that it would mess with the base health or safety. There was also a rule that men notified men and women notified women. He and a male doctor would often do this, same but a woman for the females. Usually there was only one dude and one gal per shift, so you dropped what you were doing and went. Make sense? One day, he's told to grab someone for their notification. They worked in the base mess cafeteria on the line. He didn't mention specifics cause he couldn't, but the dude had other diseases that could have been transferred by contaminating food products. Basically, you don't want this guy serving you food. For ease of typing, let's call him Fred. The guy in charge of the mess was a notorious pain in the butt, hard brass. He got stuff done well and under budget, but was so mean and ugly about everything that no one wanted to deal with him, usually referring to his assistants instead. He'll be Buck, as in Buck you. I'm funny. Brother-in-law was sent to grab Fred right before midday meal service. This had been problematic before, so he asked his boss what to do if Buck pushed back. Boss lady was stern but kind-hearted, so you would get a straightforward, honest, and supporting answer. She looked my brother-in-law right in the eyes and said, "You are acting on my authority as a health officer. Whatever you gotta say within the confines of the military code of justice, I will back your play." Not an exact quote, but that's the way brother-in-law always said it. You say boss lady gave you specific orders to do the thing, don't break the law, and she'd back you. I always thought it was awesome that she'd be so trusting. Anyway, brother-in-law makes the drive across base to the mess and asks to see Fred. Food is on the line, but no one's arrived yet. Fred comes over, brother-in-law says he's gotta come with me, and Fred goes to clear it with Buck. Instead of staying behind and waiting to hear back, brother-in-law followed Fred. This would be useful later. Buck's in his office doing last-minute stuff before lunch, and Fred tells him health services needs him. Buck looks at brother-in-law and says Fred will head over after third lunch winds down. "Sir, no sir, Fred needs to come right now." Buck explains that food service is about to start and he can't spare him. "You're not high-ranking enough to demand this private? Blah blah, bullying, go away." Any guesses where I'm going with this? So brother-in-law grabs out his radio and calls his boss. "Yeah, high-ranking boss, respectfully addressing you, per your instruction, we're gonna be clearing and dumping all food, both cooked and uncooked, on the line and off that's in the mess. Who do we notify that the mess is closed, and how do we arrange someone to get basically 400 plus fresh portions from the warehouse?" Buck is freaking out. "The freak you doing? People will be here in 10 minutes. I say, "Well, boss lady said that anything Fred came into contact with, or anything cooked by people Fred came into contact with, needs to get pulled, tested for illnesses, and dumped if he can't come now." To explain, if you handle a raw chicken and don't wash your hands, you risk cross-contamination and getting others sick. If he could make it to health services, they could run a quick test to see if his illness posed a threat and call down to the mess. It would take 15 to 30 minutes and cause a slight delay, or Buck could take over 2 hours cooking everything again. Brother-in-law said if he had a problem with boss lady's orders, he could go down to her office and state his complaint to her face. He would surely take not just heat, but torpedo his career for calling out a superior officer. So Buck tells Fred to get the H out and to not come back unless he's got written instructions stating he's not a continuation risk. Brother-in-law and Fred leave, and brother-in-law saw a "lunch will be delayed" type sign go up as he was driving away. First and only time it happened while he was stationed there. Within 25 or so minutes, Buck was able to reopen for lunch. Brother-in-law said it had been one of the only times he'd been able to say, "Screw you and the horse you rode in on," to a superior officer without getting backlash. All I know is it must have been the most satisfying thing to be able to walk into somebody who was regularly bullying and pushing people around and say, "No, you listen to me, Buster. I have orders from up high and you can't push me around this time." And our final story of the day is by Sissy V. Need a wheeled vehicle? Okay. I'm visiting Austin right now for F1, and after being exposed to the 400,000 people in the crowd for the races, decided I should get a PCR COVID test to be safe. After checking around, Walgreens was the only place that offered a test, so I booked an appointment for their drive-through testing site and took an Uber from my hotel room since I don't have a car. I assumed that they would give me the test through the window and that would be that. So when the pharmacist told me that I legally needed to have a wheeled vehicle, I asked her if this needed to be a motorized vehicle or not, to which she replied, "It just needs 4 wheels." So I walked around to the front, grabbed a shopping cart, put my butt in it, and scooted back towards the window. She was sweet and had a good sense of humor, enough to laugh and say, "Okay, I guess that qualifies today," and gave me my test. Made my day. This makes me think of those people that would make those cardboard car cutouts and go to McDonald's in the drive-thru and actually end up successfully ordering food using that cardboard car. I mean, that was pretty crafty. It does have 4 wheels. I want your boss's number. Okay. So my dad used to own his own company that unfortunately went under and vanished due to the UK recession in the mid to late 2000s. He was a joiner and knows the trade inside and out. He's told me a few stories and one of them fits here. So my dad and his team had a contract to do some work on someone's kitchen. A very simple job for my dad, but there was an antagonist. The neighbor, who we will call Karen. So it was 10 a.m. and Karen opens her window and shouts to my dad, "I'm back from the night shift and I have another tonight. You need to keep it down." My dad replies, "I do apologize, but we're currently within trading hours and I have a job to do." Karen just scoffs and walks away. Roughly 20 minutes later, Karen comes back and says, "I told you to keep it down, I have the night shift." My dad reiterates, "As I've already stated, it's trading hours and we have a job to do." Karen comes out of her house and walks up to my dad. "I want your boss's phone number." Now, bear in mind, this was my dad's company, as in, he owned it. He was the boss, but instead of playing the "I am the boss" card, he complied and gave Karen his business card with his work mobile number on it. My dad thought she was bluffing, and then he got a call less than 10 minutes later and he answered. It was Karen. "I would like to make a complaint. You have workers here and they're making too much noise, and I have the night shift tonight and I need some sleep. Also, one of them was extremely rude to me and needs to be dealt with." My dad replied with, "As I've told you twice already, through your window, it is trading hours, we have a job to do, and furthermore, your night shift is of no concern to me or my team." Karen just swore at my dad and hung up, and my dad was able to finish the work he was given. He told me that he was expecting Karen to come out and punch him in the face, but that never happened. I bet this Karen was all bark and no bite, like a little chihuahua. OP was saying that they thought the Karen might come out and punch them or slap them or whatever, but I doubt it. They were probably too tired considering they have the night shift. What do you guys think? Do you think this Karen would hit somebody if they were in the vicinity? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Pappy317. New boss loves his calculator. This happened several years ago before I retired. First, for a little background, I worked at a small cabinet factory, 150 bodies, in the south as a production coordinator. We were known as a rough mill facility, meaning we would cut the wood to the customer's required width and length, then ship it up north to one of our sister plants that would assemble the cabinets for the final customer. So we get a new plant manager, and like any new manager, he was looking for ways to increase our bottom line profit. We get this hot order for our big customer because they had a fire at their warehouse. And what the fire didn't get, the water to put it out did. Big customer supplies all the big home improvement stores. Big boss tells us that big customer was going to have to shut down equipment for not having enough product. So this comes down from the top on like a Tuesday, and Big Boss says it absolutely has to be at sister plant by Friday so they could start the assembly first thing Monday morning. This means we have to be ready to ship on Thursday. As I was the production coordinator, I was in on the call with Big Boss and new plant manager. I've worked with Big Boss for a number of years. I knew he told big customer we'd make it happen because I could feel the urgency in his voice. The first thing I do is get with shift supervisor to let him know the situation. Shift supervisor tells me we don't have enough 2¼ inch material in inventory to do the entire order. Which, because I'm the production coordinator and try to stay on top of inventory levels, I knew that. Since I knew that Big Boss and Big Customer were under the gun, I made the decision to override ride width with 2 3/8 inches. While this isn't uncommon with smaller orders, we normally wouldn't do it for orders this large. Picture a 53-foot trailer full of pallets of wood from front to back, roughly 45,000 pounds. Shift supervisor goes out and gets things changed over very fast, and we start rolling on this order. Everything's going great until guess who gets involved? That's right, new plant manager. So new plant manager calls me into his office. I go in feeling pretty good because we got things going so quickly that I knew the deadline was no problem. I say, "What's up, boss?" And while he's pecking away on his calculator, I sit quietly waiting. He gets done pecking and tells me that we're running 2 3/8 inches material for a 2 1/4 inches order. I say, "Yes, I know that. I'm the one who told shift supervisor to do it because of the inventory issue." I tell him we can't produce enough 2 1/4 inch material fast enough to cover the order and still get it to the sister plant by the Friday deadline. So new plant manager goes into full-blown beast mode and starts yelling about the yield loss / money lost. For insight, we're talking about losing maybe $1,500 on an order worth probably $300,000 plus, which I point out to new plant manager, while still pecking at his calculator and yelling at me to stop and change the lines over to 2 1/4 inches material. I try to explain to him that we don't have the time or material to do that, and sister plant is going to go bat poop crazy because we use 2 different widths. I also try to get him to understand that when we run out of 2 1/4 inches material, we will have to do a complete changeover again and go back to 2 3/8 inches material because we can't mix widths on the pallet. And yep, goes back to pecking at the calculator and spewing the lost numbers at me. So I go out and track down shift supervisor. He tells me the same thing that I just tried to tell new plant manager. Shift supervisor walks away shaking his head, talking to himself. So we change the lines over, and it plays out just like I said it would. So I had to make another executive decision and shipped everything we had on Thursday. Then here comes Monday morning, new plant manager tells me Big Boss is on the phone and wants to have a powwow about the order not being there on time. Big Boss is not happy at all. I mean, I could see his head is about to explode through the phone. He's literally stuttering and spitting as he talks. He calms down a bit and asks me what the heck happened. Before I could say anything, Big Boss asks why the heck we would produce part of the order at 2 1/4 inch and a part at 2 3/8. I told him I'd rather new plant manager answer that. New plant manager puffs up and says, "I did the math on my calculator and saw that we would lose yield and roughly $1,500. Big Boss explodes again and says to him, "Do I need to tell you where you can stick your dang calculator?" New plant manager melted in his chair and I excused myself at that point. It was just too painful to watch and I was afraid I was going to laugh. Big Boss called me later that day to apologize to me and told me that new plant manager said I wanted to use the 2 3/8 inches and that yes, I was probably right. To which Big Boss told new plant manager that there was no probably to it. I told Big Boss no problem, but I'll never look at a calculator the same again. He chuckled a bit and said, "Yeah, I'm sorry about that too." Needless to say, new plant manager didn't last long. I definitely understand a manager trying to save costs where it seems reasonable, but that's just the thing. It's one thing to stress being conservative with money when you can for a good reason, and a totally other thing to stress being conservative with spending solely because you can. It reminds me a lot of a certain body of people about right now, to be honest. And our final story of the day is by the Lone Wanderer 892. I'm obliged to call you if you're late? Will do. To give some context, I, male in my 30s, am working as an engineer for an international manufacturing company for 10 years. The atmosphere in this place is pretty friendly and collegial, for the most part that is. Although our team is facing quite a good load of stress, I've never experienced any personal attacks, until there were some organizational changes which ultimately led to having a new boss and a new boss's boss, let's call her Banshee. We were informed about those changes via mail and soon afterwards had our first personal team meeting in that new organization. First, a bit fearful of far-reaching negative changes, all was well in the beginning. My new boss, still my boss and a good guy, and Banshee made good first impressions. Motivation was high, we were praised about our previous results, and could continue our work without much interference. As part of her culture from another European country, Banshee also started to kiss team members on the cheek as a greeting in the morning. Maybe you can guess the country. She did this with all the team members, including me. It felt a bit weird, a tiny bit invasive, but also it appeared that we might be creating a good relationship and atmosphere, if that makes sense. As we're an international team with Banshee mainly working on another site, this wasn't a daily routine at least. After some months, things changed. The new position for Banshee apparently had some goals attached to it, which were pretty hard to reach. KPIs were not on target, and Banshee was held responsible for it. No one on the team was slacking, but sometimes there's only so much you can achieve. The situation had an impact on how she dealt with us. The kissing on the cheek continued, but sometimes afterwards you got some strong comments on what exactly was each team member's responsibility, implicating that we didn't do our jobs correctly. Being physically this close and afterwards being lectured was really strange. In a lot of situations during discussions, Banshee also stood very close to me. This felt very invasive, and I don't know if it was to show dominance, insert peeing on someone joke, but for me this was clearly a disregard of boundaries. Due to some necessary alignment in several projects, Banshee had set up several video calls with me. Basically, it was to check me on if I'm doing my job, but hey, I guess that's also part of her job, so that's okay. But soon, I identified a strange pattern. Banshee would set up a meeting for an hour. I dialed in, but she was not in. Normally, I like these situations because while you're waiting in the call, you're blocked for other people contacting you, and you can get some mails or other tasks done. But I digress. For some weeks, this happened several times a week. Banshee not showing up to the call, then setting up a new one. No information on why she doesn't show up. Of course, I could imagine that someone from top management with some urgent queries was taking all of her attention. And that's fine and understandable, so I never questioned the situation. Sometimes she pissed me off a bit because she set the meeting into my lunch break, which I normally took with my work colleagues. So as I waited 50 minutes into the call, I could only grab a sandwich from the cafeteria as meetings continued immediately after my break. Inconvenient, but not awful. Then it escalated. After 3 or 4 weeks of her doing this routine with me, she set up a meeting late on a Friday at 3 p.m. I had to pick up my daughter at 3:45 p.m. from daycare, the meeting being half an hour. The commute from work to the daycare was way longer than 15 minutes, so I planned to check out at work earlier, flexible work hours rule, drive home, log in at home, and spend my free time off the clock for that meeting. No big deal. After 15 minutes of me waiting, I thought screw this and logged off. 5 minutes later, I got a phone call on my work mobile. Already speaking with an angry voice, Banshee asked me where I was. I explained to her that I've waited a quarter of an hour. Maybe because we're both fluent in English but not native speakers, she missed the quarter in my explanation, leaving her thinking that I told her that I waited an hour, which was clearly impossible. That pissed her off. She exploded through the phone, screaming, telling me that's not even possible and how could I be lying to her. I repeated that I have waited and that I am available, but only for some minutes, because I had to pick up my daughter. The rambling continued. I should be available if I accept meetings, etc., etc. I tried to reason with her that for the time slot I am available, but the time slot will end in some minutes. But this attempt to explain fell on deaf ears. Still angry but with lower volume, she demanded from me that every time she was late to a meeting, I was obliged to find out if she would be late and the reasons why. I should try to call her every time. I was flabbergasted. I should call her when she was late, after she was disrespecting me with wasting my time for weeks, and me wasting my breaks waiting for her, making this call possible because I would do it in my free time. I could not believe it. Never being yelled, no, screamed at like this by my superiors before, I could only reply with, okay, I'll do so, and nothing else. After a long pause in which I refused to say anything, she asked for the status on one of my tasks. I truthfully replied with, "All done last Wednesday." Apparently that's all she wanted to know in that 30-minute call, so we ended it immediately afterwards. Cue the malicious compliance. As Banshee was pretty clear what I should do if she was late in a call, I did exactly that. Within the following meetings, in which she continued to be late or absent, I called her. 2 minutes into the call and she was not logged in? I'll call her. On the landline, on her mobile, on Skype, and then repeat? I was sure that in a lot of cases, she would be in meetings with top management, being held accountable for whatever was not going in the right direction. And in those situations, all of her phones would ring. The first time she answered very abruptly that she would call later, which she never did. The next time, she logged off from Skype and turned her phone off after 10 minutes. The third time, she answered that she was in a meeting with so-and-so, higher up. After that, she apparently didn't have the need anymore to check with me on the status of my tasks, and no more meetings were set up between us. She got what she wished for. Fortunately, sometime after Banshee was transferred to another branch within the company, so also the cheek kissing stopped. Never had a superior yelling at me again. The end. I definitely understand that it's a culture thing, but I just hope that if anybody was uncomfortable with that cheek kissing thing, they were able to opt out of that. It sounded like the expectations put upon Banshee were unrealistic, but at the same time, they also were putting out expectations, and then they themselves not living up to it. To me, it seems like they were doomed from the get-go. A vow of silence. This story takes place at a well-known fast food chain about 2.5 years ago. I'm a 20-year-old male at the time, landing this glorious position as a burger flipper after some time in the military. Took an arrow to the knee, where I learned to reinforce my already magnificent tendencies to apply rules and orders by the letter. The work in itself wasn't pleasing nor glorifying, but it came with free meals, good friends, and a lot of funny stories. And not so funny ones. So here I was on the line of duty, putting buns to heat and making burgers. A good friend of mine on the other line, right in front of me, doing her part to serve. It was a slow day, so we had time to chat around, make jokes, and overall just having a good time, while obliterating the serving timers. In comes the loved/hated manager, which we'll call Coral. She was nice to some and a real witch to others, and to me especially. I still don't know why, since she blessed her son with the same name I bear. She didn't like that we were talking since it bothers the customers, and told us to, and I quote, "Stop making a single noise or I'll write you up." Now, for those who have work, or know how a fast food chain cooking line works, you know. For those who don't, let me explain briefly. We literally have to shout when we finish a plate of anything, and by shout, I mean shout. And the receiver shouts back. So my friend and I looked at each other, then at the coworkers down the line, and we didn't make a single noise. Now the serving times bumped up from 35 seconds to 3 minutes because of empty plates of various kind. So naturally Coral comes to us and shouts, "What the freak are you all doing to be this slow?" We all stopped, looked at her, and no one spoke. To this day, we call this incident the vow of silence. If you had a boss getting on your case about being loud, making too much noise, or even talking at all, would that make you just be petty and shut up and not say anything? Maybe even stay stone-faced when they try to ask you something? Or would you think something like that's a bit too childish? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Throwaway Sue Me 31. You can sue me, I'm used to it. Okay. This happened a few years ago in 2016. At the time, I was working for Company X in a pretty new industry. Think less than 10 years old. Which means that there wasn't a lot of rules and laws yet. I don't want to give too much details just in case. Most of the people working in that industry were passionate people willing to work for free. That's how I started initially, as a writer for another company, until Company X recruited me. See, because that industry was new and mostly consisted of passionate people, it was also mostly built by friends with barely any knowledge on how to run a business. It worked because people loved it, but it had a lot of problems. Most of all, everything that had to deal with contracts, paying people, and anything HR. The little startup I was working for was no exception, and I got hired under a specific contract that was supposed to be used for people working for a short time period, not a long-term contract. I was okay with it at first. It was one of my first jobs and I didn't know better, but I soon realized it was a way of paying less company taxes and that the CEO kept lying to us. We were all under the same contract and promising we would get a real contract next month, every month. Then came the time when I stopped being paid, and that made me angry. I lived in an expensive city and was paid minimum wage on a crappy contract, so passion had its limits. I borrowed money from my boyfriend to make ends meet, and the CEO was using some of the company's money for drinks too when he was out with his closest friends in the company. After 4 months of asking for my money and never seeing it coming, I went to the CEO and told him I would sue if they didn't pay by the end of the month. Also that I was quitting at that same time too. He replied, "Go ahead, sue me. I'm used to it and I'm not scared. You won't win." That got me so angry, I resolved to sue. Little did he know, everyone was fed up with the situation, and I knew nobody had ever sued him, so I knew what he said was a tactic to deter me. I did my homework, forwarded emails to myself proving that I was owed money, that my contract should be requalified as long-term because it was hidden work, and asked for a large sum as compensation. When they got served, they paid me the missing 4 months immediately, asking me to drop all the other charges. I said screw you. And just under 10 months, not that long when it's legal stuff with lawyers, etc., they folded. I got my lawyer's fees paid by them, as well as a substantial sum of money. I was able to pay my boyfriend back with a small bonus and put some money aside too. Most of all, it scared him so much that they hired some real staff to do the accounting, changed other employees' contracts to long-term to make sure they wouldn't sue either, and now I hear that people are paid in time, which is my greatest reward. Many employees actually thanked me for suing them because of how it improved their own conditions. I now work in a different industry with a real contract, and I make 4 times what I used to make. So even though I'm pretty much banned from that industry, I'm totally fine with it and better off now. Don't tell me to sue when you're wrong, because I will. What are you gonna do, sue me? Quote from man who lost lawsuit. Next thing they say, wait, no, I didn't mean it literally. Oh God, please stop, take your money, just stop. And then ultimately, take the money, take all you want, just leave me alone. Our next story is by Silas Breakdown. Keep your hand on the wall of the pool at all times. My mother recently told me a story from childhood back when I was taking swimming lessons. The instructor had a rule that any child they were not directly working with had to have their hand on the wall at all times. This was obviously to prevent us from drowning. I did not want to stay there. I wanted to do my own thing. So I made my way to the deep end and swam to the bottom, all while keeping my palm on the wall. I was fine, but my mother was watching from the spectator's booth and freaking out. She had to later explain to me the concept of a loophole, when you obey what a rule says and not what a rule means. I'm gonna go ahead and chalk this up to crap that kids just do. Especially when that kid is a troublemaker. Listen, we just get up to the darndest of things sometimes. And as a matter of fact, it does often happen sometimes when we're so young that growing up, we don't even really remember we did that. I bet it's actually kind of a fun trip hearing about stories like this where you're like, wait, I did that? Go me. This next story is by Nartuk, Tractor or Tractor Trailer. There's a young man in the neighborhood that lives with his folks. He's a great mechanic. He loves older trucks and other weird vehicles. He and his buddy are always working on something and help others fixing cars, lawnmowers, etc. Just a really cool kid. He also has this really cool older John Deere tractor. He can be seen driving it around the neighborhood occasionally. He'll give kids rides on it and help out at the local community animal park. He parks the tractor in the street on the side of his house. It's really only about the size of a full-size truck. Well, his neighbor across the street decides they don't like it and call the cops. They come out and say he can't park it on the street as it isn't legal, so he parks it on his lawn for a while. Then one day he shows up with this massive flatbed trailer and parks it in the same place on the street. It's 2.5 times the length of the tractor and almost twice as wide. It's 4 feet off the ground with a built-in retractable ramp. He plops the tractor on it and over time adds a bunch of other stuff. Tires, cooler, wood, whatever engine he's currently working on. The trailer is fully licensed and parking it on the street is perfectly legal. Now, I completely understand neighbors getting up in arms and complaining about things that infringe on their rights or their property. If the young guy in the neighborhood parked his trailer next to their yard or blocked their driveway or something, then I think they have a little bit more of a right to complain, sure. But when they're just parking something across the street on their side of the yard, and at worst it's an annoyance to them, it just seems so petty and overblown to me. I'm like, really? You're gonna just die on that hill? You're gonna call the cops over that? The fact alone that they went and called the cops over that is more than enough for me to feel super thrilled to hear about this giant ugly trailer taking up way more space. I hope it totally pissed those neighbors off. Our next story is by Sugarman111. Screw her over on probation period? Okay, not me. This happened to my sister-in-law. She's quite a lot younger than me and was working part-time in a chain shoe shop while studying. After graduating with a business degree, she was offered a job managing at one of the shoe stores. This obviously seemed like a fantastic opportunity for her first role as a graduate. She was on a probationary period for 3 months, and after that, her salary would increase. Although the probationary period could be extended. She hated it. The owner would give her instructions, and later that day, his girlfriend would come in and give her opposite instructions. Then criticize her for the way she had worked and micromanage her until she did it her way. The girlfriend wasn't part of the business at all, but sister-in-law didn't want to cause any issues, so didn't argue. However, it was causing her a lot of stress. I noticed she lost quite a bit of weight. It came to a bit of a head when sister-in-law had spent a few hours sorting the filing out, then went to the shop to serve customers. When she went back to finish the filing, girlfriend had gone through it all and messed it up, saying she'd organized it differently for her, wasting hours of sister-in-law's time and causing her more work. Sister-in-law suspected that they were going to extend her probationary period to screw her over, even though she was doing a great job despite being sabotaged and micromanaged. Her staff loved her and sales were higher, so she started looking for another job. Surprise, they extended her probationary period, but she found a job paying more and 10 minutes from her flat. They wanted her to work ASAP, but she was sure she had to work her notice period, which was 6 weeks. She asked me to read her contract to see if I can confirm. The notice was indeed 6 weeks, except for staff on probation. Either party could terminate with 1 week's notice. Sister-in-law tells owner she's quitting and giving 1 week's notice. Owner's caught on the hop and can't find another manager that quickly. Tells sister-in-law her notice period is 6 weeks, to which she takes great delight in pointing out that her probationary period has been extended and the required notice is 1 week. Sister-in-law's been at the new job for quite a while now and is much happier. Edit, lots of people are saying you can quit when you want. I should have clarified that we're in the UK, where contracts can be enforced. To realize that somebody was being so scummy and underhanded, and then being able to just take that underhandedness, flip it on them, and slap them in the face with it, this is a very satisfying story. And our final story of the day is by Humble Salad 1075. Well, it has to be done properly, doesn't it? I work as a firefighter in a large city fire service in the UK. I won't name it, but it's a big metropolitan area. A few years ago, when I was working in another station for my current one, we all had a watch commander, is it lieutenant in the USA, who was a complete jerk. We'll call him Gov, as in the UK fire service, all the managers are called that, short for governor, which is a fire service tradition. He'd had a big argument with the whole watch the day before after we'd caught him out lying to us, long story, which ended with him telling us all to go freak yourselves and storming out of the room. The next day, we had to do a fire inspection visit at a large self-storage facility, which is basically for us to check that the fire safety rules of place are being adhered to, and that we know where all the hydrants are, and that we have the right contact details, etc. Normally, Gov would come in with us too, but he was still in a foul mood and stayed on the fire engine while we all went in. The last thing he said was, "Just be quick, as I've got so much office work to do." Well, once inside, we asked the staff there to unlock each storage unit, and we checked almost everyone there, and there were loads of them in there as well. Even the storage unit manager looked surprised and said, "It's never taken this long before." Normally just a quick look overall would do, but not today, we all thought. When we got outside, Gov was furious and asked why it had taken so long. We simply explained that we were doing our job properly and asked him if he wanted us to cut corners with regards to fire safety. He obviously couldn't say yes to this, so just sulked and said nothing. He ended up working late that day to catch up with his office work, unpaid overtime, while we were all down at the pub. We made sure to wave at him as we all left the building. Moral of the story, don't mess with the watch, as there's more of us than there is of you. I can definitely imagine in a place like a fire station, you're gonna be working long hours with guys and you're probably gonna be pretty tight-knit with them. So treating them wrong or lying to them or being deceitful to them is kind of like being deceitful to your entire friend group or something like that. You just don't do that, you know? Or you get some kind of repercussion. Use the law to withhold my deposit? Well, okay, here we go. This was a few years ago, so some of the details are a little fuzzy, but I smile every time I think about this. I moved to California in 2010 and had lined up a house on a 3-acre property with a nice-sized detached barn. We were on a rent-to-own to allow time to get settled and secure the loan to buy the property. So we had a standard California rental agreement. With the handshake agreement, it would not be needed once we purchased the house. A couple little things to fill in. The female owner was a realtor, so there was a reasonable expectation she knew what she was doing. The husband was weird. I can't explain it past that, but part of the agreement was that we actually bought the horse that was boarded on the property, and also had the detached barn full of their old crap, with the agreement that it would be removed by the owners once we purchased. So we move in, things are going fairly good. We have several cats at the time, but keep the house cleaned up, and we had one cat prone to accidents, but for the most part we kept everything good. Sometime during the winter, we have an issue with the septic system. The owner proceeds to let it slip. The septic was not put in legally and was not correct. Okay, they still paid for repairs. A month or so later, a water line the husband installed to use for watering the horse broke, and again found out it was not done correctly. This time, I was forced to pay for it. Okay, cool. Once I found out about the septic, I started looking for other houses and found one available, and we were able to get it. At this point, I give the owner about 2 months notice. We had done some improvements on the property, including a tack shed for all the horse gear. My stepdaughter loved horses and the horse was hers. So almost immediately the owner's attitude changes, and I realize we are in for a long 2 months. We're slowly moving into the new house as we have time. During this time, the owner was randomly showing up without 24 hours notice, California law, attempting to show the house with 0 warning, and the best one, she started inspecting the house before we were even moved out. At this point, we were about 75% moved. The new house was on 12.5 acres, and we did not have a pen to put the horse and goats into. One day, I get home from work, and we have to call a vet out. Owner's daughter, who used to own the horse, decided to give the horse and our 2 goats a year's worth of glucosamine supplements for the horse. We ended up with a several $100 vet bill. So we sped up things and ended up clearing a few weeks early. Because of this, there were a few odds and ends left behind, including a wooden run-to for the goats. I spent about $500 on cleaning alone to make sure we got our deposit back. I even brought in a professional cleaning service to finish the house up. I spent many times moving from base housing while military. This is common. So we complete the final walkthrough with the owner, and she seems happy. She says she'll figure everything out and send me a check. Okay, cool. About 4 weeks after the original move-out date, I get a large manila envelope in the mail from the owner. Strange, but okay, cool. I open it, and she's trying to charge me in the neighborhood of $2,500 on top of the $2,000 deposit she's keeping. Okay, lady, let's see what you got. In the envelope is about 10 small mailer envelopes and about 300-ish pictures of various things on the property and in the house, along with a 6-page letter outlining what I owe her for. So I start reading. couple hundred for trash removal, including a list of items removed, and the receipt for removal, several hundred for paint. During the walkthrough, I offered to paint the rooms we had painted. One was an obnoxious cotton candy pink, and the owner said no, it was fine. There's also a charge for close to $3,000 for brand new carpeting and high-end padding from Lowe's, as well as the receipt and also an itemized charge for labor. I believe there were a few other items, but I don't have the paperwork in front of me. Now, my first reaction was pure rage. I was seeing red. I wrote the nastiest letter to her 3 different times and took a step back. She had threatened to take me to court. Cue malicious compliance. I pulled up California rental laws, and at the time, there was a great website that explained what an owner could legally charge you for. So I sat down, and I believe the entire letter I responded to her with was around 15 pages. The highlights: I was not responsible for the painting or labor associated with, as I provided the final inspection that did not note any issues with paint color. I was not responsible for the trash removal, as she listed one item that was ours, the plywood run-to in the field, and the items actually listed were all her personal items removed from the detached barn, and it was not my responsibility. I was not responsible for paying the emergency plumbing repair mentioned earlier, and I provided the bill, and the fact that it was emergency as it was flooding over half the property and making the entrance to the property impossible. The best one was the last one, the carpets. So in her letter, she mentioned a horrible smell of cat urine, which she proceeds to explain occurred during the illegal inspections. She also had provided documentation on the cost of materials, including all her purchases. The best part? They were all dated prior to our final walkthrough. No matter the result, she was replacing that carpet. So California law is very specific on what the owner can charge for carpets. At the final walkthrough, she was okay with the carpets, but then changed her mind a few days later. So I explained to the letter that I was responsible for roughly 1/30th of the cost of replacement, as she graciously showed me the 10-year-old carpet was good for 30 years. So due to the fact it was normal wear and tear, I agreed to cover that portion. It was only a couple hundred. Now in her letter, she threatened legal action as well. So I put everything together, including a final breakdown of what was owed to her and what was owed to me, and it was close to $1,500. I also informed her I was ready to take the case to court if she didn't agree with me, as that was the next legal step. About a month later, she had 30 days to respond. I get a check for $1,250 and a short note saying she expected this issue was considered resolved. I have never smiled so much cashing a check. Let me ask you guys, if you were doing a rent-to-own type thing and a short time into your time living there, the septic just totally acts up. You find out that the septic was not legally installed correctly, but the owner goes, "No, it's fine, I'll cover the costs, I'll fix it." Would that still be enough of a situation for you to give up and look for a completely different place? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And our final story of the day is by Hendergoal. Disable an employee's innovative screen layout in video indexing application? Okay, I'll do that. Too bad about those sales figures though. This happened back in the days when companies had call centers in the US. I'm old. I worked for Company X, not its real name. Company X got a lot of its business from inbound and outbound telemarketing. I worked for the branch of Company X that set up and managed the call centers where their CSRs worked. The call center the story's about was pretty big. Hundreds and dozens of CSRs sat in a big bullpen with X Windows terminals at their workstations. X Windows terminals were basically just displays, advanced for their time, but all the actual work happened on servers elsewhere. Think of the terminals as just a screen, keyboard, and mouse that only ran the equivalent of a web browser. A CSR could sit anywhere in the bullpen and flip the on switch of the terminal to get the standard homepage. You weren't allowed to change the standard homepage, or anything else for that matter. Everything you did as a CSR was via a script. There was no deviation from the script allowed. In theory and practice, human customers are prone to going off script. One of the apps? I don't think they called them at that time, but it's essentially the same thing. An icon you could click on to do a thing was a video player that allowed the CSRs to look up a commercial that a customer would call about. This was an inbound telemarketing site. Think of it like a private YouTube, I guess. The commercials themselves didn't have a ton of information about what the services and terms that were offered, and the clipped voiceovers that came at the end were hard to hear or interpret. So the idea was that the customers would call, and then the CSR would find the commercial on the app and explain the offer to the customer, hopefully leading to a sale. The app was pretty buggy. Networks, even local access networks, didn't have a lot of bandwidth back then, and video playback ate up a ton of it. Plus, the descriptions in the video's metadata weren't always the greatest, so CSR and customer conversations tended to be long discussions like, is it one where the little boy talks to his grandpa about calling during the holidays? No? Is the little boy black or white? Oh, it's a little girl? And it's the grandma, not the grandpa? Wait, is it the one where there's a picture of a horse on the wall? I'm looking at it right now. It's a black horse. No, the horse is black, not the little girl. Call times for those types of calls were abysmal. Add to that a very confusing home screen layout, and the result was that sales numbers for the site were pretty bad. Enter Jake, which might be his real name because I can't actually remember it. He was a comp sci major at some school that I also don't remember. Jake did not like the workflow of the mandatory/standard home screen, and he hated the stupid commercial video app. So, being a comp sci major, he did the logical thing. He fixed it. Jake figured out that you could interrupt the boot up process of your workstation and get it to load its configuration from somewhere else. I don't remember the exact method he used, but the end result was a very efficient workflow that allowed him to walk customers through the process in a fraction of the standard or mandatory time. Jake also started writing up detailed descriptions for the commercials, indexed by topic, market, where the commercials aired, etc. And even having the era's equivalent of tags. An example, picture horse or character grandpa. He put all of that into a searchable database he created. He somehow got that on his workstation as well. The end result was that Jake could take a call, figure out what video the customer was inquiring about, and walk them through the offering, terms and conditions, and sign someone up in 5 minutes, where it took any of the other CSRs 15 to 20. Disclaimer, I'm pulling those metrics from my butt. The point is, Jake set things up so he was much more efficient than the others, using the standard and mandatory tools. Eventually, Jake's cool new home screen got noticed by the other CSRs. They wanted their numbers for call duration and sales to improve as well, so they asked Jake how he did it, and Jake very kindly showed them how. Pretty soon, a lot of other people were upping their game with Jake's cool new home screen and video index database. You know what happened next. One of the bullpen managers noticed that Jake's terminal always looked different from everybody else's. That would not do. The handbook specifically stated that employees were not allowed to change the terminal. Worse, Jake's video index database made it easy to simplify the script that CSRs were required to use. Going off script was a huge deal. Managers had these headsets that let them listen in on any call, and they could screen mirror any employee's screen. Jake got called into a meeting and let go. I never heard what happened to him, but I suspect he graduated from his comp sci program and went on to do great things. Jake, or whatever your name is, if you read this, sorry you got fired. That was a pretty crappy thing for them to do. I hope you invented Google or something and are now reading this from the deck of your mega yacht. I got called into a different meeting, the topic being, how do we prevent employees from hacking the workstations? I was like, this dude you just fired increased his efficiency and sales numbers by orders of magnitude. Shouldn't the first topic be, how do we implement these same changes for all of the CSRs? My suggestion was not well received. Jake's hack would supposedly cost the company tons of money for retraining, not to mention the salaries required of folks like me, who were tasked to prevent other CSRs from, gasp, improving efficiency. It wasn't an approved standard. Legal hadn't reviewed it. The folks who monitor ADA hadn't vetted it. It promoted reckless behavior in other CSRs. The script had been developed by a lot of people whose job it was to develop scripts. It wasn't Jake's job to develop scripts or apps. It was Jake's former job to read the darn script, say the words on it, and use the tools that were given to him. I spent a lot of time and energy trying to convince my management and Company X's management to use Jake's improvements. But the bottom line was, I was told to just fix it and to obliterate all traces of Jake's hacks. I wasn't even allowed to keep a copy of Jake's database. So I shrugged my shoulders and did exactly what I was told to do, with predictable effect. Call lengths increased, sales rates sank, CSRs who were looking at nice fat bonuses suddenly saw those become impossible, and not a few of them quit. Customers started dropping off calls because they were taking too long. Company X probably lost a ton of business, although I'd be hard-pressed to quantify it. But it was cool, because the bullpen managers were getting their fat bonuses for script compliance, and I got a big pat on the back for figuring out how to lock down the terminals. I honestly don't even remember how I did it. Probably just a BIOS password or something stupid like that. In the end, it probably didn't matter all that much. Company X moved all their telemarketing overseas, and that particular call center shut down. Technology has moved on, but I honestly hope there's someone out there hacking whatever workstations they're forced to use. You can definitely tell that this is an old school call center or tech company. I mean, I guess it's just a call center, but I feel like in the modern days, employees are encouraged to look for any kind of efficiency boosting shortcut or workaround or anything like that. Nowadays, I feel like if an employee found something like that, hopefully they would actually implement it because they realize how incredibly valuable that is. I too hope that Jake is sitting on some mega yacht somewhere being like, I'm glad they fired me, I went on to bigger and better things. Snow shoveling dramas. I'm reminded of a story that happened while I was living at home. You may enjoy it. This happened in the late 90s, early 2000s for reference. My dad owned a snowblower. During the wicked weather this side of the Rockies, he would use his blower to take care of the sidewalks in front of everyone on both sides of our block. Most of the families on my block were either seniors, those with small families, or younger couples that inherited their dead relatives' home. Everyone knew everyone, and they understood that my dad was doing this as a courtesy. He was in his 50s and just trying to be a good neighbor. So, my neighbors 2 doors down divorce and sell their house to a family from out of state. Fake name time. Picard sound good. I know they were from a snowy state, but I don't remember where. They moved in during the late summer, close to the start of the school year. A couple of months later, our state has a massive snowstorm. It would snow for nearly 24 hours for almost the entire winter. You would shovel and clear snow just to get another dump, and you'd have to keep going and going. We had something like 350% of the average snowfall that month alone. So my dad's out there during the first big dump with his snowblower, just taking care of business as he's nice. And the third house down had an occupant that walked on arm crutches. He had just made a path from our house to theirs. No big deal, been taking care of this for a while now. He gets done and heads to work. He gets home late most nights, so he's not expecting anyone to be at the door as he walks in. Lo and behold, the Picards must have been watching out the window for him as they walk up on him as he opens the door. They say, "Hey, did you shovel our walk?" He says, "Huh?" They say, "Our walk, the one that runs in front of our house." He says, "Oh yeah, I did your sidewalk." They say, "Well, we're not paying you for the shoddy work you did. You sprayed our tree with snow." My dad is out of it after a 10+ hour day, commute not included, so he's not getting what's happening. He says, "I'm sorry?" They say, "You should be. That tree is too small to handle that much snow blown on it. You need to blow it somewhere else." As my dad was the one that religiously read city bylaws, he knew the time frame for removing snow and where you could put shoveled snow. The city doesn't allow you to blow snow into the street because it messes with the plow's ability to take care of the streets. But Mr. Picard insisted that he had to blow the snow elsewhere. Knowing what he knew, my dad directed the snow into the only other spot available, his driveway. A driveway that is almost 45 degrees down from the carport too. Or so it seemed, wicked steep either way. So the next day, the neighbor comes by to complain again. He didn't know that a small snowfall can get cars stuck in the driveway, let alone what we had plus a snowblower. His car got stuck halfway in the street and he had to get it towed out. If my dad were home, he could have saved them the tow fee, but Picard didn't know that. So Picard is fuming and saying he's gonna do his own walk from now on. My dad tries to tell him he's just assisting the neighbor on the other side, and he doesn't charge for being a good neighbor, etc. It's cold and my dad wants the door shut. But Picard doesn't want to step in, and my dad doesn't have his shoes or coat. So Picard just says, "I know what I'm doing, I'm a grown man, I can deal with a little fluff." The next day, my dad knocks on the neighbor's door and tries to tell Picard about how strict the city is about snow removal, and how he has 24 hours from the start of snowfall to get things removed, etc. He wrote down a website where he can go to read the rules, but Picard didn't take it. The city was constantly driving down our block for reasons I won't go into here. The Picards were doing a semi-sufficient job manually shoveling snow away properly, but then October in my state has a big teachers conference, and most families go out of town for a late camping or early hunting trip. So did the Picards. They're gone for 4 days during the worst snowstorm of the season. They hadn't arranged to have the walk shoveled, and the snow was piling so high, city inspectors came out. Parents and neighbors complained to the city that they couldn't walk down our street. It was obvious that the walks were being taken care of, so why not theirs? The city posted a 48-hour compliance notice, but it would be 72 before the Picards got back to town. The city charged them with hazardous conditions and failure to maintain property accessible to the public. On top of the labor fee to shovel the walk, it was like $350 easily. The city kept a watchful eye on the property for the rest of the winter for any issues from then on. Once the city has you on their radar, it's hard to be done with them. The cherry on top of the entire situation? There's a knock on the door in early November, same year. One of Picard's kids handed my sister an envelope and just walked away. We give it to my mom, and inside there's a note saying something like, "This is for the shoveling you did already." There was a $100 bill inside. My family tried to return it, but they never answered the door. So we used it to take our large family out to our favorite buffet later that week. Thank you, Picards, for paying for a free service. We spent it well. If you had some neighbors that gave you the runaround for doing some free community work, and then at the very end they realize they actually want that work, and that you were right the whole time, and they silently slip you a $100 bill, would you take it, and would that be enough for you to go back to helping them? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Sporting Gamer, Make Me a Coffee. Old military story from a friend of his, says in the green. He, Andy, name changed for privacy, was a corporal in the British Army, posted to a base, doing his job as normal. In comes a warrant officer 2nd class, equivalent to Master Sergeant in the US, and he is full of himself. "You, make me a coffee," he barks at Andy. "Shazam, you're a coffee." Andy waves his hands like a magician. "Don't make me spell it out, Corporal. Go and get me a cup of coffee." Moments later, Andy returns with a cup filled to the brim with instant coffee granules. "There should be hot water, milk, and sugar in this," says the warrant officer. Andy returns to the coffee station and boils the kettle. When he returns, the mug is now overflowing with thick brown sludge. A spoon is standing up in the mug. "Jesus Christ, what the heck is this?" "I added hot water, milk, and sugar. There wasn't much room left in the mug." Andy remains straight-faced while the warrant officer fumes. "This isn't over," he says as he walks into the captain's office. After the warrant officer left, the captain shared the story with Andy about how he wanted the worst possible job for Andy. After his deliberate mocking tone and reprehensible obtuse nature, the captain happily raised his voice for the office to hear. "I simply said to him, 'Did you tell Andy to make you a coffee?' He replied yes. So I asked him what the response was to that order. He told me you went, 'Shazam, you're a coffee.' I told him that was the first clue that Andy here isn't a brew witch. Ask him nicely, and you might get a better result." Always loved hearing this story. Some guy who's full of himself finally gets to a rank where they're like, "Finally, I can boss people around. I can walk into a room, point at the first person I see and say, 'You, make me a coffee.'" They stroll in there, they do what they desired, and the person just goes, "Shazam, you're a coffee." Maybe they need to work a little bit more and get a little bit higher up on the totem pole before they go around bossing people around like that. Or, maybe just treat people like human beings, ideally. Our next story is by Steve Bow 0124. Don't scan the package, enter the number manually. Alrighty then. This was over a decade ago at a package shipping company. As a loader, I would scan a package and place it in the trailer so it could go to wherever it was going. Easy job. I'd pop my headphones in and easily meet the 300 packages per hour minimum they set. I was the second fastest loader in the building actually, with a guy we'll call Rick, who worked on the other end of the facility, being the first. So every couple years we get a new manager. This new manager comes in and right away just starts wanting numbers to improve. Any that weren't making their goal, he wants to make their goal ASAP. He was the type of manager who always found something wrong no matter how good we did. He was also the type of manager to use the word family, which I hate. We were a family supposedly, even though our reward system was abolished in favor of management meals prior to work. One thing he wanted to improve was the packages that were entered manually instead of scanning them. It made no sense. It was a number that had no impact on anything. But he wanted just one entered by each employee daily, and we complied. Every day I'd do my one, but one day we arrived and apparently there was a miscommunication between the employees about our start time. We arrived to a trashed area with packages everywhere. The supervisor looked horrified. You see, when you get backed up, it's hard to recover. And stopping the conveyor belt only makes it worse because you take a shot of packages again due to the unload not stopping. It makes for a rough night. So I put on my scanner and directed the supervisor to follow me. I went in the last trailer on the belt and me and a coworker went straight beast mode and saved the night. Hardest night's work outside of the holidays, honestly. I clocked out after and went home. The next day I arrive and the manager pulls me to the side. I figure I'd get some appreciation for my efforts, maybe some recognition in the form of a cheap hat or something. Nope, he rips into me. Why didn't I key enter my one package? With all those packages yesterday, I had the opportunity. He claimed I was being lazy and had the union rep around so he could give me a verbal warning. So with me saying it won't happen again, cue compliance. I key enter every package that night, did not scan one. At first, my supervisor thought it was funny, but when the area took a hit, I kept going. He asked me to stop and I said no, I'm still doing my job. The manager came with the union rep outside my truck, but even entering the tracking numbers manually, I was over the 300 packages per hour required. They couldn't touch me, even though I normally do 200 plus more per hour. The night ended and my supervisor came to talk to me. He said that was impressive and gave me a cheap hat. I laughed and thanked him. I commented that I definitely got the most key entered packages that night. My supervisor looked at me and said, "Nope, you're second. Rick beat you by about 50. The same exact thing happened to him, and I was still in second place. But I got my hat at least. I hope it was one of those fun hats that say like, 'Fish fear me, women want me,' or the very rare and dark but funny flip, 'Fish want me, women fear me.' That'd be a nice cheap little hat. In all seriousness though, why would they be so adamant on having such an antiquated process be done by everybody at least once? That seems like a pure OCD thing, like they want to see the funny number look higher. Just because they want to see the number higher than 5 per night because those 5 were with messed up barcodes or something. Just doesn't make any sense. And our final story of the day is by Drakey. I want you to always try before trying to figure out if it will work. Sure, boss man. I'm still working at the same place and enjoying what I do, so my apologies that I'll keep things a little vague. Boss man has since left though, which is why I'm sharing now. Please be warned, the fallout is extremely small, but it was to me a small petty win that I look back on fondly. The setup: at my workplace, every employee has 3 sets of duties. The first set of basic duties is the same for each and everyone, which is a prescribed number of hours per day for which we're rostered, with the total number of hours per week ranging from 10 to 28 hours depending on whether you're middle management or an ordinary employee such as myself. The secondary and third set of duties are highly varied and are organized into various committees, which an employee can technically change between every year. Some involve heavier working hours or planning, whereas others involve more menial, simpler tasks. As you may imagine, rostering the prescribed hours for employees must be a heavy affair, and there must be a committee to oversee it. My second set of duties happen to fall under this committee, and I help with rostering, which is mainly done on a highly specialized, and expensive too, software twice a year, with the committee managing substitutions whenever an employee is away on sick leave or other reasons throughout the year. Although it was my first job, I'd been personally trained for 2 years by my predecessor in the committee, who was due to retire. At the time of the malicious compliance, I'd been a valued member for 3 years who has made noted contributions towards the rostering processes. Now on to the malicious compliance. As usual, our story starts when a new boss came into our workplace, whom I shall call Boss Man going forward. There's usually 2 or 3 bosses of equal standing above our middle management. Now, Boss Man fancied himself a people's person who would often listen to the grievances of ordinary employees and try to find ways to change things such that ordinary employee satisfaction could improve. Now, this usually would be a good thing, except that he would entertain unreasonable requests as well. This resulted in time wasted trying out untenable solutions or situations where work was shifted around such that it became unfair to other individuals. As you may expect, this usually caused new grievances, and then work was shifted back to how it was originally allocated because that had been the most fair in the first place. We had to interact with Boss Man quite frequently as some grievances had to do with rostering. As Boss Man had some experience in said committee in the past elsewhere, he fancied himself an expert in what we were doing. We frequently found ourselves explaining to him why certain grievances were unreasonable and we couldn't accommodate the requests during rostering. Finally, it reached a point whereby he said something along the lines of, "I want you to always try before trying to figure out if it will work." Now, we work 5 days a week. One of the instructions he had given us, along with that ultimatum, was that one particular employee be described no more than 4 hours a day, with a total number of 26 prescribed hours every week. Those of you mathematically inclined will see where the problem is. 26 divided by 5 is 5 hours daily, with 1 left over. There was no way we could follow his instructions, unless the employee came in every day of the week. But oh well, Boss Man wants what Boss Man wants. None of us said anything to Boss Man and proceeded to run the software, producing multiple failed rosters as the software could not produce a full roster for everyone. But man, did we keep trying. The fallout. Eventually, Boss Man came to check in on us and our progress as we were behind schedule, since the roster also had to be vetted by middle management. And managers were wondering why Boss Man had not given the go-ahead for any copies of the roster. The manager for our committee, who's really awesome and tactful, informed Boss Man that no full roster had been produced, as we were still trying to get the software to ensure that particular employees did not have more than 4 hours rostered per day. Boss Man asked why there was a problem with that, which is when the manager reminded him that he said employees had to fulfill 26 prescribed hours a week. Boss Man was confused as to why we didn't bring this up earlier, as it was clear that this set of conditions isn't logically possible. The manager tactfully reminded Boss Man that he had given us these conditions along with the instruction to try first before trying to figure out if there were any problems with the conditions he had given us. To be fair to Boss Man, he took it in his stride and approved the suggested changes we requested to the set of conditions he had given us on the spot. We delivered a satisfactory roster to him by the end of the same working day. For the remainder of the time he was with us, Boss Man would actually listen if we proposed changes or protested to some of the unreasonable requests with regards to rostering, without requiring us to waste time trying it out first. I think the good thing you can take away here is the Boss Man seems to mean well, albeit a little dysfunctional. I think it tells you all you need to know that OP was writing this story about maliciously complying with Boss Man, but OP sounding a little disappointed that Boss Man's no longer around. At least, OP never said that it made their jobs any harder or made them hate working there at all. At least Boss Man wasn't afraid to try to change things up to make people happy. He was very specific about what data he wanted. So I work for a large IT company, and we have several projects which work with other companies and other departments. It's pretty gargantuan, so it's super easy for you to come across teams or people who you'll never have met despite having years of service within the company. In this story, I've been assigned to a project where we're migrating legacy data from one old system, let's call this Pepsi, to a new one, let's call this Sprite. Normally, this would be a fairly trivial exercise, except for two things. The new system is air-gapped for security reasons, meaning that any inbound data transfer needs to be handled via removable media. 2, the project manager assigned to the project is a complete jerk, and completely disregards the advice of the technical staff despite having no understanding of our tech himself. So we had a call today to discuss what data would be captured, how much was needed, etc. In this discussion, the subject of file attachments was brought up. For further context, in the Pepsi system, files can be attached to user requests. These can be anything from Word files to PDFs. In the target air-gapped system, they have Microsoft Office and all the tools you'd expect most IT systems to have. We're nowhere near the stage of moving everything yet, so the customer decided that they wanted a proof of concept test to see how things would work, specifically geared around attachments and how they would upload into Sprite. The following conversation took place. The project manager says, "We need to test how Sprite handles attachments. Can we move some attachments from Pepsi into Sprite?" I say, "Yes, we can, but the system is air-gapped, remember, so a data movement request will take some time. Also," the project manager says, "That doesn't matter, just get it done." I say, "I understand, but it usually takes 3 to 4 days for these transfers to be organized, because someone has to drive to the site to do the transfer. I know that time and billing are critical here. You might actually be better just creating dummy attachments inside Sprite and testing them that way. All the infrastructure is there for it, and also I was going to say," project manager says, "Look, stop trying to make the decision when I've already made it. Make the arrangements to get this to happen." I say, "Okay, can you send the minutes out with this included, please?" The project manager obliges, expressing in the minutes that go to every man and his dog, explaining that he's rejected my solution and that we'll wait for the actual data. Because I work in day-to-day operations with these tools and I know everyone involved, I was more up to speed than a management type who only had a passing interest in us for as long as his project assigned him there. In my response, I finally get across the point that I was trying to say in the meeting. I would arrange the file transfers immediately, but of the staff who had security clearance to access Sprite, that weren't on the opposite side of the world, one was in maternity leave, one was off with COVID, and the third had left the company the previous week. I estimated that it could be as much as 3 weeks before his request was completed. Don't think he was very happy based on his response. In situations like this, where somebody's being very hard-headed about just getting something done, talking over you, when you have a very important point to make, do you believe in those moments it's fine to get a little heated and make sure your point is out there? Or do you think that that person's intentionally sinking themselves and if they're gonna be that insistent, it's not worth the bother? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Appropriate Emotion 63. Would you like some coffee? Some background context, my girlfriend has a personality of an angry chihuahua sometimes. She'll be petty about something out of nowhere, but she doesn't know how petty I can be. One day, I was rushing out after work to go to the gym. I was kinda pressed for time, so I thought I'd make myself an espresso shot as a pick-me-up before I headed out. I usually offer to make her one when I make one for myself, but it was late in the evening so I didn't know if she would want one because it might keep her from sleeping. Plus, she was just chilling in the next room, plus I wanted to get to the gym. Yes, I still felt bad for not asking her, but that's besides the point. Make my espresso, down it, and started heading towards the door. She says, "Wait, you made a coffee and didn't offer me any?" I say, "Yeah, I have to get to the gym." She says, "I thought you'd have offered to make me one too. The least you could have done is ask." "Just do you then." I do me and head to the gym. Get home from the gym, she conveniently takes her last sip of coffee, probably waiting for me to walk in to make a point, still upset about it. So I said, "Okay, I'll ask her if she wants coffee next time instead of assuming." Next morning comes, we usually go to the gym together in the mornings, but she loves to sleep in sometimes, and today was one of those times. I decided to go on my own, but, as routine, make my espresso. Cue malicious compliance. I run back towards the bedroom where she's all snuggled up. I say, "Babe." Her springing up straight, still half asleep. "What's going on?" I say, "I'm making coffee, do you want any?" We had a good laugh, she went back to bed, I went on my way. This is one of those things in hindsight where I feel like it would have made sense in the moment and done the same thing, and then you get guilt-tripped about it and you're like, well, I guess I could have taken 2 seconds to walk in the other room and ask. But then you go to the gym and you're working out and you're like, wait, why do I have to ask every time I make coffee? In the middle of lifting heavy weights, like, I don't have to ask every time I make an espresso. Then you get back home and you're promptly, yes dear, yes babe, okay, I'll ask next time. Our next story is by Sia Soya. Hey, remind me to pick this up. Okay, Ma, please pick this up. This is a relatively short and simple malicious compliance. Every time my mom asks me to remind her to do something, I remind her immediately after she says it. Hey OP, can you remind me to pick up those aqua socks from the repair shop? Okay Ma, please pick up the aqua socks from the repair shop. Of course, the spirit of her request is to ask her later or after a while, so of course, I remind her when we're in the middle of something. In the middle of buying Speedos, funnily enough, I say, oh yeah Ma, don't forget to pick up your aqua socks. She says, dang, you're right. Funny enough, I feel like having these kinds of exchanges might help somebody remember things a little bit better. If you have like a little cutesy exchange and you laugh or you're like, okay, I feel like later on, my mind might go back to that moment and actually remember. But it would be nice to be reminded of whatever later on too, just in general. This next story is by Sergio0713. Won't reimburse my cheaper version of the books? Fine, I'll order the newest, most expensive versions. Back when I was in college, I worked part-time for a big company that had tuition reimbursement. Normally, the tuition reimbursement process was long, but the people who processed it were cool and helpful. However, the second time I submitted for reimbursement, I was denied part of my reimbursement because one of the books I submitted wasn't requested on the class syllabus. I had gotten an older version of a math textbook, which the professor had already approved. I called the tuition reimbursement department, and the person assigned to my case would not budge on making an exception, even after I submitted my professor's email from the beginning of class stating that my chosen book was a good substitute. Eventually, I got a mean email with all the rules of the tuition reimbursement process, in which it said that reimbursement could be submitted up to 90 days after the class ended, and that all books on the syllabus would be covered. So, I canceled my reimbursement request, bought the book brand new, and submitted everything again. Got a nasty email about why I hadn't submitted the receipt the first time. Eventually, they paid out everything, including the new book, which I quickly resold for a profit. I did this for 5 years, undergrad and part of grad school, making a profit almost every semester. Actually, that's not a bad loophole to figure out. If you can find a reliable place to buy the used books, buy all the new ones for however much more, undercut the price by just a little bit, and make a nice little profit off of near full value of those books that you already got reimbursed for. It's hilarious too because what OP got as far as an older book goes probably would have saved that company a lot of money. But I guess they don't care as long as you follow the rules. Our next story is by Juicy Globule. No bag allowed in X-ray? No problem. This malicious compliance is my partner's rather than mine. Partner's currently on clinical placement as a healthcare student based in the X-ray department. Due to working in a hospital, her supervisor has told all students that they can't carry any bags with them at any time, no exceptions. However, the staff are allowed small bags. Unfortunately for her, Aunt Flo is currently visiting and requires attending to a minimum of once an hour. This means she needs access to her bag at least as often. The same bag, which is not permitted to leave the changing rooms, which are a good 15-minute walk outside away from the department. If you've ever worked or been a patient in a hospital, you'll understand how they both are endlessly big and labyrinthine. Her supervisor listened to the above and agreed that it was not a good situation, but that she could not and would not change the rules just for my partner who should just deal with it. She made it clear that it was not her problem to fix, and my partner should fix it herself. She complied with the instruction and dealt with it. She took the fresh, full box of sanitary products out of her bag and plopped it in the X-ray control room in full view of the rest of the staff and other students. By the end of the day, the staff and students were advised that the rule had changed, and students could carry a bag if needed. First of all, how much do you want to bet that this rule was made by a guy? Just throwing it out there because I feel like most guys, me being one of them, have enough experience going through their life without ever having a bag around that they're like, they would never need a bag. But if you've ever been in somebody else's shoes, especially like OP's partner here, you'd know that there are some situations where you genuinely do need that bag. Although the situation in general was bad, I think the good thing is they were able to adapt it after realizing we made a mistake here. The funniest thing of all is this was in the healthcare sector. Yeah, deal with your sanitary stuff on your own. You would think of all the workplaces for that kind of thing to happen, the last place would be within a hospital. Our next story is by Condorith Yes. My Nana's compliance turned into one of my best Christmas memories. The compliance isn't quite malicious, more of a clever, crafty compliance. My sweet Nana likes to call all the grandkids months before Christmas to ask what we all want for our gifts. She likes to make sure we all get something we like. I'm notoriously bad at asking for things since I feel bad when people spend too much money on me, and I can never think of something inexpensive on the spot. When she calls, I usually avoid the question and procrastinate a few weeks on deciding what to ask for until my mom bugs me to give Nana an answer. My avoidance tactic last year when she asked what I wanted was to answer with a hippopotamus. I'm a big fan of the song I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas, and I thought she'd get a kick out of it since the song came out when she was a kid. She was very amused and we sang the song afterwards. When the holidays rolled around, I realized I had never called back to give her a real answer. Nana is known for taking things literally, but clearly the hippopotamus comment was a joke, right? Well, she took it as an opportunity to teach me a lesson. When I visited her for Christmas, my gift was a gigantic hippopotamus squishmallow. For those unaware, squishmallows are very soft, dumpling-like plushies. I love my hippo very much, and he's lovely to sleep on, but I learned to start planning what to tell Nana a little in advance, instead of trying to brush her off with a joke. All around, a great Christmas, and I wouldn't trade my hippo for the world. I mean, it is what I asked for. This is one of those stories where I actually relate to OP very heavily. The hardest question for me to answer a lot of times is, what do you want for your birthday or Christmas or whatever? I don't even know what I want. I think the problem is what I do want is either hundreds of dollars and unrealistic to ask for, or I just want money. I think the biggest problem with myself is I don't really have inexpensive things that I want. I'm not huge on material things like jewelry or watches or rings or anything like that. It's a challenging thing to know what I even want for Christmas. And our final story of the day is by Ghost Cardinal, The Wrong Kind of Cream. Full disclosure, I was the victim of malicious compliance in this case, and I'm mostly telling this from secondhand accounts, as it was 20 years ago. When I was a kid, I loved ice cream, could never get enough of it, and whenever I'd see any, I would, like the immature child I was, demand to have some. One time when I was around 4 to 6, I was at a restaurant with family. We were all eating, and I saw they were serving a white, creamy substance. Now, I immediately thought this was certainly vanilla ice cream, so naturally I demanded my dad give me some. He tried telling me it wasn't ice cream, but I didn't believe him, and everyone else was getting annoyed with my antics. So, cue malicious compliance. Instead of smearing it on bread like everyone else was, my dad gave me a big spoonful. I happily chomped down on it, only to immediately recoil with a look of shock, disgust, and betrayal that only a child could muster. If you hadn't guessed by now, it was cream cheese. My dad laughed and told me it was cream cheese. However, being a young stupid child who just thought he ate ice cream and clearly didn't believe his father the first time, I didn't believe him. Thought it was ice cream, and apparently refused to even touch ice cream after that for 3 years. And apparently after I learned it was cream cheese, I avoided that like the plague too. Luckily, I've overcome this youthful foolishness and enjoy both ice cream and cream cheese. But lesson learned, always know what you're eating before you eat it. This just gave me shameful memories. As a kid, I think my parents took me to a buffet place. It was probably Golden Corral. And I was in the entree section, and at the very back corner there was this one thing. I couldn't quite make out what it was. I don't know if there was a label or anything like that. So I got a few spoonfuls of it, just like a decent little serving of it on my plate. I bring it back, and my family all go, "What is that?" And they look closer and they go, "Steven, why did you put so much butter on your plate?" And in that moment, kid me was mortified that I didn't know it was literally butter I scooped onto my plate, and I had a mashed potato-sized serving of just butter on my plate. Well, if anybody needed any butter, I had it. supervisor handoff. So this was around 17 years ago, but reading a bunch of these posts made me think about it all over again. I was an overnight supervisor at a Steak and Shake in Florida, making $9 an hour to essentially supervise myself, doing all the positions in the kitchen at the same time, while our one server handled everything in the dining room. One of the policies of the store was that no supervisor or manager could leave until their relief manager showed up. I come to work on a Tuesday night for a shift that goes from around 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., do the normal thing, and my relief manager doesn't show up. So I just stayed. Breakfast shift comes in. I continue to operate in the capacity I'm in. I'm 19 at the time and have some kind of sleep disorder that allows me to run on very little sleep, so I just roll with it. The breakfast manager never showed up, and the GM didn't bother coming in that day. 10 p.m. rolls around again, which would have been the start of my shift all over again. So I'm still stuck there. At this point, I've dragged a stool from the back room to the kitchen so I can rest my feet. But I'm otherwise attentive and continue to process orders in a timely fashion. Shift number 2 draws to a close. GM was scheduled to come in for that morning, flaked on it. Now I'm on my second day straight being in this building and no relief comes. We're back to my shift again. I'm some weird combination of exhausted and livid. 8 a.m. rolls around again for the third time, and my GM comes in as the breakfast relief manager. I can only imagine I looked horrible, but he somehow found it in him to complain that the sourdough bread wasn't stocked. Told him it was stocked 2 days ago, clocked out, and slept in my car in the adjoining Walmart parking lot because I didn't trust myself on the road. The rest of the week played out as normal. Cue later on in the week, the assistant general manager pulls me into the back office to have a talk with me. She was going over payroll and was deeply confused as to how my $9 an hour self out-earned everyone this week. I explained working 2 days straight will do that, and how I didn't have a choice given the policy. To her credit, she wasn't angry but astonished. It was a rather glorious paycheck to my teenaged self. If you worked at a place where they said you cannot stop working or leave your shift until your relief comes in, but they just don't show up, would you just keep on working straight through? Or would there be a point where you just give up and say, this is too much for me, I need my time, I'm going home? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Intimity138. My manager told me to stay in the back. At my first job at McDonald's, been there for 3 years. I would be in the back drive-thru for the last year of my work. My rude manager, we'll call her Karen, was there today. Not surprised that my replacement called in sick. She always calls in when Karen works that shift with her. So Karen told me that I was gonna be in the back all day, that I was not going anywhere else, no matter what. I'm gonna stay there until 10 p.m. I was already there since 6 a.m. in the morning. The afternoon staff is always shorthanded. When she told me that, I complied to her demands. Told my GM before he left for the day. On to the gross part. This occurred around 6 p.m. when this homeless lady comes in. I do have horrible tales about her, but that's for another Reddit. She goes into the restroom to wash up. When she comes out from there, she's telling us the restroom was full of poop everywhere. On the walls, the toilet, and the ceiling. This is not the first time this has happened. She was like, clean the restroom. Like, lady, you always mess up the restroom. But I digress. Karen comes to me and says, you need to clean the restroom. I'm like, I have to stay here all day. Karen says, no, you have to listen to what I say. I snap back with, I am Karen. You told me I'm gonna stay here all day. She got angry real quick. She even tried to write me up for disrespecting the manager. I'm like, you told me to stay back here all day. You either clean up or I leave and you still clean it up. I told the GM what you told me. He'll back me up on it too. I complied with her demands of staying back there. She cleaned up the restroom and never bothered me like that again. I kept my job, had a big laugh about it with my colleagues. 8 months later, I left that horrible job. I'm now at a better job where I almost get paid 3 times as much now. She's still there after 5 years after I left, still making it heck for people. I want to add that the owner didn't care either. The only time they ever cared about anything besides money was either about the law or suing them. Other than that, they hardly cared about us. I was getting paid $7.25 at McDonald's. Now I'm getting paid $19.50. I've been with my current job for 5 years now. Man, imagine being in that situation where this manager says, you're staying here all night, you gotta stay here and help out in the back, specifically the back. Some lady comes in and smears poo all over the bathroom, over the walls and everything. Obviously, you don't want to have to clean it up, so you go back to the person and say, "You, get in there and clean it up." And the person catches you in it and says, "I'm not here on a shift, I'm here to help out in the back. You relieve me from my duties back here, I'm going home." And realizing they're exactly right. They don't have to, knowing you're doomed to have to clean up the poopy McDonald's bathroom walls. This next story is by some account 89235. Housing cooperative pisses me off. This may paint me in a bad light, but I don't care that much. Just a note that this happened in Poland. I'm living in a block of flats with slightly higher standards, meaning we have a gate and our own parking spaces, trash cans, camera system, and everything. I work as a programmer and remotely. I'm also single and I keep mostly to myself. Try to never harm anyone, not get into any drama, just live slowly and steadily alone, barely leaving home except doing groceries. So my neighbors know me as that homeowner that never causes any problems and is always helpful or polite. One time, I had to replace my current bed. It was old, dirty, and I just wanted something better. So I ordered a new bed and dismantled my old one, ready to be taken out. Once every 2 weeks, a truck comes in and checks through the neighborhood to take away all the big things set aside beside the trash containers. That day was tomorrow. Sadly, I live on floor 3, so taking my old bed alone would just be too hard for me alone. I asked my brother for help, but he couldn't have done it tomorrow, so he helped today. Now, before this, our block's terms of service say that you're not allowed to put out big trash except on the day the truck comes. So, not wanting to make any outbursts, I asked my favorite neighbor for a favor. If I could put it on their parking spot the day before, because, well, I wouldn't be able to do it on the correct day. He gave me a thumbs up. Then I checked with another member of the housing cooperative board if it's fine since the owner of the spot knows. He said it's also okay for him. I moved on with the plan. My brother came in, we moved my old bed outside, occupied the spot, and called it a day. That's when the Karen came in. She's around 50 plus years old from the looks. You know, the type that sits the whole day in the window and tries to find something to complain about. She got into my home and tried to explain that it's against our community rules. So I had to have it taken away right now. I, in exchange, tried to explain to her why I did that, how I got approval from people and whatnot. She was not having it. She threatened to call the police on me for littering if I didn't get it done today. I said, sure, okay, I guess I'm technically in the wrong here, so I'll just comply. I called a private company to take the bed away today. I also specifically went to her home and told her it would be done today. She said it's fine. So the truck arrives, they start taking away the bed, and so does the police. Apparently, she already did call the police without waiting for me to do anything. I'm livid and literally panicking. Not because I was afraid of a fine or anything, but just because it was the first time in my life that someone did something hostile to me, even though I said I'd do what she wants. I explained the whole situation. The police see no problem. They don't even cite me anything. They just give me a handshake, pat my back, and leave. The lady that called the police looks out the window and yells, "Thank you, officers," with a grin. I am even more upset at this point. I think to myself, you want to perfectly obey the law? Fine, I'll make sure you do. I see her taking out the trash. I clearly hear glass bottles in the bag. I look out the window. She throws it in the wrong container. I call the community board. Bam! Your rent went up because you don't comply with our sorting garbage rules. Next day I come back with groceries. I see her car. She parked a little over the line, so it's basically like taking up 2 spaces. I call the police. Bam! She gets a fine. She walks out her dog in our private space. As I watch her through the window, I see her dog pooping and she doesn't scoop it up. Oh, did you just do that? I call the community board with a complaint. She came to me and wanted to apologize. Now, here's the part that makes me look bad. I said, no, I don't accept it. Why? Because I'll admit, I am vindictive to people who try to create trouble for others without very good reason. I said, all I'm doing is making sure you're following the community rules. Is that wrong? And she scoffed at me something rude and went away. I've been doing that 3 months now. A month ago, she was kicked off the board for too many rules violations. Today, she moved out. But before she did, she made sure to put a bag of trash on my doorstep while I was away. Sad for her, she's stupid and the trash contained a letter with her information on it. So I had the last laugh by reporting it to the police. I know, rules are rules. I was technically in the wrong first for breaking them. But the moment she went out of her way to enforce them and then screw me anyway, that's when the line was crossed. I have no shame for bullying her out of here. I was just doing the God's work and ensuring that the rules are not broken. I personally see nothing wrong with what OP did here. In my eyes, we're all human. We sometimes need a little bit of help. In situations where somebody puts something in the parking lot and they're not supposed to, first of all, I probably wouldn't question it until it was clear that they violated something. Like if the bed never got picked up, then sure, but if it's there for one day and then it gets picked up, who cares? But the bottom line, if I ever talk to the person and they explain to me, I'm on the 3rd floor, I can't do it myself on trash day, I just need to set it there for literally one day, I'm not gonna be the type of person to complain about that. What kind of ridiculous stuff is that? So this Karen in the apartment complex or whatever, trying to enforce these rules and calling the police, they got everything they deserved, because who wants to live near a neighbor that treats people like that? Our next story is by Tiny Alien. You want all of the leftover eggnog? Fine. This happened yesterday. My mother makes homemade eggnog sometimes, and since yesterday was Thanksgiving, she made it. We all got some, but she left the rest of it to my younger brother and I, since no one else wanted any more. My younger brother has this idea that he's entitled to things simply because he does a chore he has to do, even though everyone else in the house has already taken their turn in doing so. He thought the rest of the eggnog should be his. Usually I'd split it, but he was saying how he should have all of the leftover eggnog the whole time we were drinking. Now this is where the compliance is. Since the eggnog is homemade, the spices tend to fall to the bottom of the drink, and is usually dumped out when we're done. No one likes the spice bottom, especially my brother. We walk over to the rest of the eggnog. I pour his cup first and refill his cup with all of the leftover eggnog. This included a 1/4 inch of the spice bottom, which was now at the top of his drink. He tried telling me to stop, but I simply said, "You wanted all of it, so I'm just giving you all of it." He couldn't drink it right away since he had to wait for it to settle. He complained to my parents, but they and my older brother just laughed. Totally worth giving up my share. You gotta love relatives that don't want to share at all. If there's a situation where you can let them have that share, but you can suck all the fun out of it, that's worth it enough for your sibling. And our final story of the day is by TJ Max 1. Brand new manager tries to fire me. Let's see how this ends. I'm a 100% disabled vet, but I still wanted to work for as long as I can. I worked in a large company that contracted to many of the big oil companies. For years, I had excellent reviews and the customers loved me. My manager got promoted and one of my coworkers became the newly promoted manager. He started out fine, but then as he went through management training, he became that boss people hate. He was trying to flex his muscles by using all the usual tricks of setting you up to fail in order to fire me and a couple of others. Why? I have no idea. One day at work, I had a major medical emergency that left the right half of my body with no feeling at all, completely numb. That took me out of the office for several weeks while I used steroids to try and help sort out the issue. A couple months and an MRI and spinal tap later, they discovered I had multiple sclerosis. After I was diagnosed, he decided to pull me out of the customer site and have me work in the office. My job had zero office work. I spent nearly a year in the office getting paid to do stupid, mind-numbing BS, while he tried to figure out a way to fire me. Since the initial issue was medical, it proved to be very difficult, so he would try to assign me to long-term duties, like 6 months, hundreds of miles from home, knowing I could not do them. He was nitpicking any menial task I did not perform to his liking. He knew I couldn't travel as I have to see several doctors every month, and I could only refill medications from my local Veterans Affairs clinic. While he was trying to fire me, I was talking to HR about my disability and how it's obvious that I can no longer perform my job for safety concerns. That was the reason my boss pulled me into the office. I also informed HR about how the manager treated me and several other employees. They had me do several things, including sending my medical records to a company medical doctor to make sure I was being honest, I assume. In the end, HR decided to put me out on pre-approved early retirement with short and long-term disability. Now I'll get paid from the company till I'm 67, all before he could get the chance to fire me. Additionally, several other workers quit around the same time as me, and a short time after I left, he was replaced by a different coworker. Thanks, boss. Don't you love that because you had medical disability, they were trying to shift you around and give you all these hard jobs? That only made it easier to give HR your case of why you can't keep working and get early retirement? By trying so desperately to find a way to fire OP, they gave them all the evidence they needed to get a nice, comfy early retirement. Thanks, OP's boss. Then there was that time I was in a conference call while duck hunting. This took place maybe 2008, was mid-2000s for sure. I was a manager, but had arranged time off to go duck hunting with friends. The day before I was to leave, I was pulled into a meeting due to an emergency, and there would be a war room conference call with other offices the day after. I had nothing to contribute nor deliver for this meeting. It was merely higher pay grade than me folks hashing out a problem and then issuing directives. I said no, I'm not canceling a trip I planned for over a year with friends I hadn't seen in an incredibly long time to sit and listen to people argue. I got different replies from my manager and his manager. By different, my manager was pleading. His manager basically said, "Show up or you're fired." I said, "Fine, I'll be on the conference call." Turns out where we were hunting, I had cell signal. So I called in. During the meeting, my manager's manager called on me specifically to contribute. I figured he was making a point. I was talking and said, "Hang on a sec." And my friends and I started shooting. It was quick, there were 4 of us, 2 12-gauge shots each. I went back on to finish talking. I was asked, "Was there shooting?" I said, "Yep, I'm duck hunting." Our regional VP asked, "Why are you on the call if you were off hunting?" My reply was, "I was told it's mandatory or I'm fired." My manager's manager began backpedaling and started saying I was a team player and knew the benefit, etc. Basically, he was told, "We'll take this offline." You gotta love these situations where a higher up demands you show up to something or they'll have your job, and then in front of everybody higher up beyond them, you get to explain the stupid reason you were forced to show up, and because you were allowed to honestly say why you were mandatorily there, you get to watch them squirm and backpedal and try to make things okay for them. If you were told by a manager or a boss that you had to show up to some Zoom meeting, but it took place in the middle of your scheduled time off for a vacation, would you still attempt to do it and show up? Or would you say, "I scheduled this time off, I'm taking this time off," and just find out what happens? Let me know what you would do in the comments down below. Our next story is by Jock McFarty. No standby policy, no standby. I used to work in IT support for a big financial institution. The company had firm policies on overtime, standby, etc. But management didn't like spending money. Occasionally, one of us would get called out overnight to dial in and fix a production issue, in which case we'd get a reasonable overtime pay for the call. What wasn't reasonable was that we had no standby arrangements because management would have to pay us to be on standby, even if we weren't called. So one time, after getting 4 callouts for 4 unrelated problems spread over one night, I decided enough was enough and bought an answering machine. The outgoing message was, "I can't come to the phone right now, please leave a message." A few days later at the daily team meeting, the manager chewed me out for ignoring a couple of phone calls as another member of the team had been obliged to fix a problem. I explained that since there was no standby policy, I didn't have to be available to answer the phone. He huffed and puffed a bit, but since it was his policy, technically his boss's policy, there was nothing he could do. The very next day's team meeting was interesting. A problem had come up overnight, and I couldn't be contacted because answering machine. So Night Shift had tried the next member of the team and got his answering machine. The third guy had been slow off the mark and picked up the phone, but promptly announced he would be buying an answering machine that same day. Boss went to Big Boss, then came back and begged us to not use answering machines for 1 month. Instead, to keep a shared spreadsheet listing callouts, and Big Boss would make a decision at the month's end. So we agreed. It didn't take that long. Within 10 days, we had a lucrative paid standby rota. This is really one of those shortcomings of everybody being so interconnected and reachable these days. I don't know when this story took place, but the fact that they got your phone number, they can call you up and reasonably expect they're going to at least hit your phone that you almost assuredly do have with you, kinda sucks in a way, because back in the 90s and earlier, even the early 2000s quite a bit, a lot of times if you were out, you just weren't reachable. There was kind of an expectation that once you're off work, you're probably not going to be available to just get called back in unless there's a system set up for that. Our next story is by MashMash42. My company agreed to pay for very expensive transport instead of just letting me commute easily. So a few years ago, I worked for this dispatch agency that would contract me out to various locations. They paid me in peanuts and treated me like subhuman dirt. I even had to go so far as to be identified by a number rather than name when I spoke with management. Management, which I hear has just kind of collapsed in on itself due to just obviously pathetic management skills. Anyway, so this one place they contracted me out to was located far away from any train station or bus stop, and I don't own a car, so I asked how I should get there. They told me, and I confirmed with the client, that there was a bus from a train station owned by the client that took employees and visitors there. So for about the first month, I took that bus every morning around 7 a.m., even though I didn't actually start work until 9:30 or 10. But that was the only bus, so I had no choice. Suddenly, one day, the manager shuffled around a bunch of employees for some reason, and I got stuck with this new scheduler, who was, I think, fresh out of college and had no idea what he was doing. For some reason, he told me that I had to stop taking that bus because it was owned by the client. And I don't work for the client, I work for the company. They love to remind us of this. The client even said they didn't mind if I took their bus, as that just made the most logical sense. But no, I told them I could walk from the train station, but it was going to take me an hour or two, and the only feasible transport besides the bus was to take a taxi, which would be a $40 trip one way, so to get back ends up $80 a day on taxis. Yeah, they're expensive in this country. So he told me to take a taxi. I straight up told him, "You don't pay me enough to be able to afford a taxi." I was thinking they would capitulate and let me take the bus, but as if to pathetically assert dominance, they actually gave me an allowance for the taxis from then on. And since I could take a taxi whenever, instead of waiting for the bus, I showed up to the client at 9:30 with 2 extra hours of sleep. It was actually a pretty nice setup. This is actually kind of an interesting thing. Let's say theoretically you could pocket that taxi cash and still take the bus, but if you just paid that taxi cash, you would get a couple more hours of sleep every single day. Which one would you value more? Being able to sleep in an extra couple hours every single day, or getting to pocket the extra cash from the taxi? I'd like to know which one you guys would choose in the comments. The extra sleep would be nice, but that is a good decent bit of money. It could be practically a second job, essentially. This next story is by someone you don't know, 70. Pass on your bogus excuse? Okay. I was a medic in a light infantry battalion in the US Army in the early 90s. In our infantry battalion, there were 2 sets of medics in the headquarters company who all belonged to the same platoon. Most of the squads in the platoon were in the first set and were referred to as line medics. They were constantly lent out to the various companies in the battalion for field exercises and so forth. For all practical purposes, line medics did just about everything the other infantrymen did out in the field. For the most part, this entailed trudging through snow for long distances while lugging our belongings around our backs in a rucksack and pulling a sled with an Arctic 10-man tent. The light in light infantry alludes to the fact that we travel light enough to not need a vehicle. In reality, there was nothing light about it. One squad in the medical platoon permanently remained with headquarters. In the field, they were in charge of maintaining medical records, setting up and staffing the battalion aid station in the field, driving the ambulances, and keeping the battalion pharmacy stocked. We had some guys who had served for quite a while in Alaska, and they knew all kinds of tricks that enabled us to set the battalion aid station up as the warmest tent in the field. Given that most of our training took place in sub-freezing temperatures, the aid station was the place to be. We often had officers from the other companies just come and hang out simply to get warm for a little bit. Needless to say, if you could get a position with the aid station squad, you were set for field exercises. Far less walking, far more warmth, and a far happier life. There was a fellow line medic in my unit who I'll call Slug because that's the generic term we used in the army for someone who was a waste of space. I actually liked Slug when I first met him. He was friendly, easygoing, and he seemed to be an all-around nice guy. Over time, my respect for Slug waned more and more. He always seemed to be broke, and he was not shy about asking to borrow money. He gave his girlfriend my phone number because he didn't want to pay to maintain his own. and she would always call me to vent about him on the numerous occasions that she caught him cheating on her. If there was ever work to be done, he always found excuses to be elsewhere. To put things in perspective, avoiding work was a highly respected art form known as shamming in my unit, but there were caveats. Avoiding work at your buddy's expense was frowned upon, and clumsy excuses that put you or your buddies in a bad light were also considered to be in poor taste. For example, getting 4 guys together for vehicle maintenance at the motor pool, when in reality they were each simply going to get on a creeper, a board that rolls under vehicles, for a mid-morning nap, was a highly regarded form of shamming. Slug loved to sham, but he was terrible at it. More often than not, his attempts made the rest of us look bad, and they often brought more work on us to boot. For whatever reason, the stars aligned in Slug's favor, and he was given the opportunity to attend SUSV driving school for the purposes of driving an ambulance. A SUSV is an all-terrain vehicle that was invaluable to us in the snow. This golden opportunity was poised to deliver him from the harsh life of the frontline medic into the luxury life of the rear medic. It just so happened that the first day of driving school happened to fall during the daylight savings switchover. The change was such that anyone forgetting about it would have shown up to work an hour early. Slug thought that he would use this to his advantage to sneak in an extra hour of sleep, seemingly unaware that the change had already brought him an extra hour of sleep. I had just come in from shoveling the snow outside the aid station around 15 minutes before his class was scheduled to start, when the following exchange took place between me and the aid station squad leader. The squad leader said, "Have you seen Slug around today?" I say, "No, Sergeant, I haven't." They say, "Can you call him? His driving class is scheduled to start very soon, and he's going to be late." I say, "I'll do it right now, Sergeant." Realizing this was urgent, I quickly found his girlfriend's number and called him up. The following conversation then ensued. I say, "Hey Slug, squad leader's asking where you are. Apparently you have a driving class that's about to start and you're late for it." Slug says, "Yeah, tell him I forgot about the time change, so I'm running an hour late." Me, knowing that if he had forgotten about the change, he would have been an hour early, says, "Are you sure that's what you want me to tell him?" Slug says, "Do you think I'm BSing about this or something? Just tell him what I told you." I say, "Okay, see you in 15 minutes. So I hung up and made my way back to squad leader. I say, "Sergeant, I just got off the phone with Slug." He says, "And?" I say, "He said he forgot about the chime change and is running an hour late. He'll be heading in soon." Squad leader says, "Do you have a driver's license?" I say, "Yes, Sergeant." They say, "Can I see it?" I showed him my license. He says, "Great. Take this packet, head on down to the motor pool, and tell them that there's been a last-minute change of plans. Slug is unable to make today's training session, so you'll be taking his place." And that's how I went from living the miserable life of a line medic to the relatively easygoing life of an ambulance driver and a guy in charge of the battalion pharmacy. Whenever I'd see Slug in the field complaining about how cold and miserable the last few days had been, I would commiserate with him, expressing gratitude about how good I had it back at the aid station, with regular meals and near constant warmth. "That should have been you," I'd tell him. "It's too bad you weren't able to make it to your training on that day." This is one of those stories where I kind of feel bad for Slug, but I also kind of don't. I get where they were going with trying to take advantage of the extra hour, but I also don't. It was just a dumb idea altogether. They tried to game the system or take advantage of things, and it blew up in their face. I guess that's just how it goes if you're gonna play that game sometimes. And our final story of the day is by Random Blaze. Boss is power hungry and told me to be on time, so I changed my work times a bit. So I did my apprenticeship with this company, and after the 3 years, I moved to a standard IT position at a plant near my home. The first 6 months went great, and the communication with colleagues and the boss were good until one day. He wanted to talk to me about a few things, but one stuck out like a sore thumb. He asked me to pull up my timesheet where all our log into work and log out of work times are saved. He told me to be on time because I was 3 times too late in the last 2 months. He would check it regularly and would get back in touch if it happens again. The funny thing is, I was 1 minute too late on those days because of traffic reasons. I drive 25 to 30 minutes, and I also stayed longer on these days. So he told me to better plan for it, and he wants me to be here exactly at 6. I was furious about this. It seemed like such a useless complaint and just a way of keeping me under control and to mark him as the boss. Normally I would come in at like 5:50, work time only starts at 6, and leave around the 13:50 mark. Work ends at 13:45 and paid overtime starts 31 minutes after closing time. I would start working before 6 with easy work like mail and stuff, and worked a bit of overtime because I had to pack up. Now, I just drink coffee and stand around while looking at my phone until it's exactly 6 o'clock and I log in. Not a minute early, not a minute late. He wants me to work exactly at 6? Okay, I will, but I'll also leave when my time is done. I also pack my things neatly so I can log out exactly at 13:45, and I don't stay longer because I need to be on time. Overall, he lost work time with useless power tripping. He never mentioned the change because he can't do anything about it. I've absolutely never understood anybody that power trips over login times that are a minute or two late, especially if you can look back at it and see that they were staying later plenty of times over to make up for those 1 or 2 minutes. All complaining about that does is serve to piss off people who were giving you good extra work probably, and they'll start leaving you shortchanged because you expect overtime work, and they're like, no, you told me to be on time, I'm leaving exactly on time. Out of the flow and into the lunchroom. I work as a software developer. The type of projects that I do are usually the more niche ones, so I tend to work alone most of the time. With working from home, this meant quite a nice bit of flexibility in scheduling my day. Of course, there were the meetings that were useful, the meetings that should have been an email, and the 3-hour meetings that should have been a 2-sentence email, but other than that, I was relatively free to arrange my time however I wanted. Quite regularly, when I'm working, I get into a state of flow. I lose my track of surroundings, lose track of time, thank God for meeting reminders, and just happily work away at my assigned tasks. This means that I often don't notice it's lunchtime until it's well past lunchtime. But with working from home and a flexible schedule and all that, this isn't an issue. I get my grub and eat it while staring at a wall and milling over the problem that I'm trying to solve. When I'm done, about 20 minutes-ish usually, I generally have some new inspiration and I'm ready to dive back in. Earlier this month, my lunch break was rudely interrupted by a call from Mr. Obvious Pseudonym, or Sue as I like to call him. It was 2:20 p.m. at that time. Sue is a manager, not my manager, but he's my manager's manager. He asked me to look up a few things and send them to him. I replied that I'd do that first thing after my lunch break. He then informed me that I wasn't supposed to be on lunch break at 2:20 p.m. because lunch was from 12 to 1. I told him that I was working from 12 to 1, and in fact only started my break 5 minutes before his call. But he wouldn't budge. Alright, have it your way then. Since then, I've been setting a timer for 12. No matter what I'm doing or how deep into a piece of intricate logic I've worked myself, screen goes black, and I'm out for lunch. And I've been taking that hour as an hour indeed. As it's free time, I'm not thinking about work during that time, and when the clock strikes 1, I'm back in my computer, ready to try and figure out what I was thinking about an hour ago. Depending on exactly what I was doing, it takes me about 1 to 1.5 hours to get back into it. Of course, I've talked to my manager about Sue's instructions. He thinks of them as highly as I do, but has no way to overrule him on this. So this is the new status quo. We're already starting to notice a hit in productivity in my projects, but I'm just doing what I'm told here. For another story here on this channel, I was talking about how some students learn and work in their own ways that work best for them. I think for a lot of development jobs and tasks too, there's varying ways that some people really work well. I have friends that work in the software developer kind of space, and I know some of them, once they're in the zone, they hate having any distractions or any interruptions because they're deep into it. They're thinking about how their code works, how it's going to branch out, things that are going to influence it. Imagine creating something and you're so in the zone and you know this part's going here and this part's going there and I'm doing this section of it. Hey, you have to take a break right now for an hour. It's like writing a book and you know what the next 3 sentences are going to be, but you're working there, and somebody says, no, you have to take a break, stop what you're doing. Are you able to pick stuff up and put it right back down with no problem? Or are you a worker similar to OP that when you're in the zone, you prefer to stay in the zone until you're done, or reach a natural stopping point? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Malibdeem42. You forced us to recruit? You just made yourself expandable. I'm an officer on a guild, a group, playing a well-known MMORPG, massive multiplayer game. We're playing twice a week on an event called a raid that requires 25 people. As we were a bit short on players, we approached another very small guild that was interested in playing with us for those raids. The idea from the start is that we'll continue this collaboration as long as our guild is too small to go alone. It was a win-win situation for both guilds. Ours will have stable players week by week, and they'll be able to participate on big raids that can't be done with only 5 players. For a time, this collaboration was doing great, despite a few incidents, and we even stopped trying to find new players for our guild, as the current situation was fine. We tried our best to make the small guild welcomed and treated them as guild members. We asked a few times if they wanted to join us in only one guild, but they always refused, not wanting to lose their identity. We even stopped actively recruiting, as both guilds were happy with the situation. A few months later, we had a few new players joining, friends of friends, and we get to a point where we may have to ask a few players to not participate on the raids from time to time. So we inform the players from both guilds that we'll start to make rotations. It's very common and not a surprise, as players sometimes are not available because of the real life. So guilds are usually aiming for 30 to 35 people ready to play for a 25-player raid. This is when the other guild leader said the following: "We're a small guild, a small community of highly selected players that want to play together. If one player is asked not to play for a night, no one from our guild will play." So basically, the small guild made of a few players that was now essential for the raids because of their role and their level of equipment, said that all of their players should always play, and that our guild will have to sacrifice players instead all the time. This, with a few other events where the small guild was making our life a bit difficult, was too much for us. Why would we favor players that aren't in our guild, refuse to comply to basic rules, always complain when the rewards from the raids don't go to one of their players, and so on? So here's the malicious compliance. They wanted us to find more people for the nights when we only wanted one player to not come on the raid. Let's find them and recruit them. If we make rotations, and we will, and we lose 5 players when it's time for one of the other guild players to not come to the raid, we need to recruit more people to make sure that we'll be able to go to the raid. So let's recruit 5 players with the same role as the ones from the small guild that will join us and participate when they couldn't. We search for a bit and quickly find new players in 2 days. But now, we're enough on the guild to go alone on the raids. As per the rules we set together, it was now time to stop the collaboration. We gathered our officers and their entire guild and explained to them we'll now go to the raids without them, and thank them a lot for all the time and dedication they showed us for the past 3 months. The collaboration was well appreciated by the guild, and we wish them the best of luck for the future. Because they wanted to have privileges and exploit our situation to their advantage, using the fact that we needed them to raid, they forced us to resume the search for more players, making them less useful. We struggled for 2 weeks while we trained and equipped the new players, but now we're autonomous. It was obvious that the smaller guild must have thought they were way too valuable, like as in they could never replace us. Since we're so valuable to them, we demand to get this and that and whatever. The demands probably would have kept growing beyond that if you complied to that. When the reality is, there's a lot of players that play whatever MMORPG this is, I'm assuming Warcraft. It's not impossible to find 5 more players. The beauty of an MMO like that is there's probably always going to be people looking to get in with bigger groups. If your group's big or good enough, I feel like 5 players is probably easy enough to find. Our next story is by Cinnamon Bun Bun. Sure, I'll keep my meals under $30 as per the policy. I'll make sure it's $30 every single time. I do a lot of fly-in, fly-out travel for my job. Usually I'm so busy with work while on site, or I'm stationed somewhere with food options I don't want to waste my calories on, and I don't eat anything the whole day or just buy a coffee. Our employee expenses policy at work is $30 a day, which is mostly fine. But there are some high cost of living cities, and sometimes my meals go above the policy because there's not many options, especially if I want to eat healthy, which is important when you're constantly on the road. Plus, so many airports have completely shut down their food courts and haven't reopened them yet, so there's hardly any options but fast food. So I submit my expenses 1 month, and I've gone $1.50 over the daily limit because I treated myself to a coffee that morning, as well as a lunch because I was tired after the god-awful early flight I had to take. The company had recently changed their policy, and now a different set of people are approving expenses. The previous people didn't mind going over by a few bucks because it balances out with the trips where I didn't eat anything, but this new group are absolute sticklers and rejected the expense, citing I was over the daily limit. I tried to argue that I had 10 other visits that month in which I didn't eat a single thing, but they still weren't budging. it really left a sour taste in my mouth. Now, every single visit, I force myself to spend as close to $30 as I can because screw them. My husband's happy because it means I now bring back, slightly squished but free, food for him. I feel bad for wasting food, but often I just buy a meal and eat a few bites and throw it in the bin. However, the expense policy is $30 a day, and by God, I'm going to stick to it now. While in the past I might have billed $100 for the entire month because I didn't bother to eat, I'm now billing twice or 3 times that. I also used to push myself to keep working all day, but now I religiously take my 30 minutes to go and buy some food. So that's 30 minutes less work they're getting from me too. This is the kind of thing where you need to try and organize some kind of grassroots movement with your other coworkers, where every time all of you are trying to charge as close to $30 as possible because of this $1.50 injustice. This company wants to nickel and dime you when you're saving them money on their expense trips? Fine, everybody's gonna charge you $300 a month now instead of way less than that. And our final story of the day is by UE Loyalist. We didn't break any laws? Sure, go to the authorities. This story took place in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married, and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house looking after people. However, after our daughter was born, she didn't want a job that put her on the road so much and shifts in the evening. So, she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near our community. 2 things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habit. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country, so the local boss hired my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tight. Louise is the boss, who hired her best friend Donna, as well as Donna's brother Dan and Louise's niece Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. She immediately saw things were not quite on the level. Even though my wife was paid from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was home by 8 p.m. every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents, and other shady stuff. My wife also saw Luis threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. Luis's husband was a senior NCO in the unit, but jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to their ethics. However, after a few months, the racial epithets started. It started with a nickname, then morphed into slurs and rumors about her. They started telling racial jokes without trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the 4 of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak, and they threatened her employment. My wife told them that she would go to the head office, so she called the head office from work. Stuart from HR dressed down my wife over women's talk, and she needed to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities. Stuart said, "No laws have been broken, so she should go to the authorities. Good luck." Later that shift, she was fired for attitude. So my wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. She gave photocopies of her logs. The Human Rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviors. That garnered an apology and an acknowledgement from Stewart with a smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled through in the tenancy buildings had reported that they suspected they had been snooped through. The dates of some of their reports matched my wife's logs on the date she was there. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up with, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties, a violation of an abuse of authority statute. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per day. The base pulled the security and key logs showing that work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that the federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the commission's investigation determined that they were in violation. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company, and they found out others were having similar issues. As a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract broken after the second year. Luis, Donna, Dan, and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in. All personnel had to undergo vetting for security. All cleaning was done during the day, preventing people from rifling through desks. 40 hours was 40 hours, and the cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond casual "How are you?" conversations. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while she wonders what Stuart thinks of women's talk now. Don't you love when you hear stories like this of people who not only mistreat women, but mistreat minorities and are racially insensitive? Not just insensitive, but flat out racist. Where they feel all high and mighty and untouchable, and you report them, and everything just comes crashing down around them, and they get what they had coming to them. I gotta say, this was a very good malicious compliance, and very satisfying to hear the outcome. Hold the sour cream. In high school, I worked at a Taco Bell, almost 20 years ago. Had great customer reviews in the drive-thru in front, worked long hours on Saturday nights, came when expected, all that jazz. It was late one night, and we were getting ready to start cleaning. This Taco Bell stayed open until 3 a.m. Guy hits the drive-thru and asked for a taco salad, hold the sour cream. I helped run the cold line, so I did the vegetables, cheese, and sauce, boxed it up and bagged it, and just before I grabbed the bag to go to the drive-thru window, I took the sour cream and squirted a dollop into my hand. I did the entire transaction one-handed, clearly holding that sour cream in the other hand, with a smile on my face to a dude that drove away doing a triple take, as he drove away with the most confused look I've ever seen before. My coworkers were on the floor laughing. I got wrote up for it the next day because the guy called 1800 Taco Bell on me for it. Glad I found a sub to share this story in. I still laugh about it. Honestly, that was kind of funny, but I doubt that a guy going through a Taco Bell drive-thru at 3 a.m. is really going to be the most captive audience for something like that. If you pulled through a drive-thru at 3 in the morning, you saw this go down, would your mind have those irrational thoughts like, did they scoop it off my food? Or driving away, would you think, did I see that right? Would you think it was a weird dream you had or something? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Mr. Twitty, but what if I get a parking ticket? I drove for Uber and Lyft for years. One of the most annoying things is when customers aren't ready when I show up. I mean, you can see me on the map on your phone as I'm driving towards you, right? Anyways, Uber's made it very clear that they won't pay for tickets, parking, or any other kind. When a driver arrives at a busy place, like downtown or at a bar at 2 a.m. on a metered street, they'll often hit the hazard lights and block traffic. As you can imagine, cops swing by and tell them to move it, or else. Sometimes they don't even give warnings. Meter maids don't warn either. They sneak up in your blind spot and snap a picture of your plate, then either hand you the ticket or mail it to you if you drive away. When asking Uber about it, they state that the driver must follow all applicable laws at all times, with no exceptions. No problem. I would arrive at the spot and hit arrived. If no place to park and no people waiting there, I would keep on driving. Maybe there would be a place to park around the corner. Maybe I would have to drive around the block. And if people weren't standing on the curb, I would circle again. Eventually the timer would count down and I would cancel the ride as a no-show. I would get paid a few bucks and the customer would get charged. But if the customer called Uber, their charge would be reversed. I can't tell you how much money I made from Uber's stupidity. And the customer? They would instantly order a new ride, and guess what? I'm right around the corner. OP says it's Uber's stupidity, but I definitely understand why Uber as a company would try to avoid having to pay any of these tickets. First of all, from a legality standpoint, if they cover these or they support these fines or tickets, it probably could be perceived as if they're supporting breaking the laws, which in general probably isn't a good idea for the company, but also they just don't want to have to pay any extra fees, obviously, like any true company would. This next story is by Haljon. No loading dock for you. I worked in management for this company that was once a very pleasant place to work. We had a large office with a warehouse facility attached. For my area of work, I needed to use the loading dock regularly to send or receive equipment, and the warehouse guys were cool and helped me out. Things started taking a bad turn when we were acquired and combined into a much larger company. We'll call them Megacorp. They already had a larger warehouse facility, so it only made sense that they would shut ours down. It was sad, but initially didn't impact me. Slowly, all the warehouse guys left until there were none. One day, I was notified by Megacorp that the rear of the building would become inaccessible for tax reasons. I inquired about this as I needed the loading dock for freight I had coming. I was told that it was effective immediately and that nobody was to use the loading dock or warehouse under any circumstances. I immediately objected to the facilities team and explained that I had a shipment inbound with a long, something like a 10-foot, device that must come at the dock. No exceptions, you'll have to schedule liftgate service from now on. This was to be at the expense of my own projects as well. Begrudgingly, I had the shipment redirected and we scheduled liftgate service. It was amusing to see these guys get this device off the truck and onto the liftgate. They were pros about it, but I could tell it was heavy and frustrating. This practice had to continue for a while, and I took all sorts of crap from customers for requesting liftgate service for everything now. We would still have the occasional truck show up with equipment and no liftgate, and we would have to turn them away and pay fees for redelivery. I was a good company man about it and did what I was told though. One day as I was leaving the office, a large flatbed truck arrived. I spoke with the driver and he said Megacorp sent him to take our forklifts to their bigger warehouse, over 5 hours away. He needed me to open the loading dock for him. Oh no, we aren't allowed to use the loading dock. He looked at me like I was stupid. Also, we don't have any licensed forklift drivers here, so no can do. I sent him on his way back to Megacorp and he left for the day. Not too long after this, the facilities team inquired about why the forklifts couldn't be picked up. I re-explained their own rules back to them and left it at that. I quit not too long after that, but I was satisfied that I made sure that everyone followed the rules. Isn't it great that everybody has to follow the rules until the people who are enforcing them want to skirt around them a little bit? It doesn't apply to me, it just applies to you. Rules for thee and not for me. This next story is by Splunkzop, Coal Mine Compliance, a story. I work in a coal mine driving dozers 95% of the time. We got a new general manager recently, and he wants to pee on every pole so everyone knows he's the top dog. Part of this is spewing about following procedures and management having been giving write-ups for very minor things. Not wearing gloves when you climb up the ladder to get in a dozer, D11, or truck, Cat 793. Not wearing a mask in the car park, having a window open on their Land Cruiser. The list goes on. Cue malicious compliance. Saturday night, start of shift, a grease line's come off the tilt ram on the dozer blade. Our pre-start book says you cannot operate the dozer with broken grease lines. Category A fault. Normally we'll call up the workshop and they'll say, "Yeah mate, we'll catch up with you later, just operate it till then." And we will. Thing is, the pre-start book says before operating a machine with a Category A fault, it must be fixed, or the workshop supervisor has to come out and sign off using the machine. I reply to workshop, "Not a chance of me starting this machine until the fault is fixed, or you sign the pre-start book. Remember mate, procedures, procedures, procedures." This was 7 p.m. on Saturday night. Just after 10:30 p.m., workshop were able to get out to fix the grease line. It just needed to be reconnected and took less than 3 minutes to fix. Screw them. The people operating the machinery are slowly doing more of this, and it will/is slowing down production. Well, if somebody's gonna come in here all high and mighty, touting the procedural book, touting the rules, touting the policies, it only makes sense to ensure that everybody follows them, even if it directly annoys the people who are trying to enforce them. If anything, they deserve it. Our next story is by Fallen Angel 7334, Delivery in under 90 minutes. This happened last night. I work as a driver at a restaurant, and most of our business is takeaway and delivery, and we close at 9 p.m., accepting orders until the last minute. Last night at 8:55 p.m., we receive a small order. Not a big deal, happens every now and then. We put our standard delivery time of 90 minutes, a precaution in case we're busy during the day. A few minutes later, we get a call from the customer asking when his food will be delivered and if we can hurry. Now, we've already cleaned most of the kitchen, Not a problem. The delivery car was parked and I was ready to go home. Not a problem. My boss hating people micromanaging her. Huge problem. She takes the phone from me and explains to the customer that the 90 minutes are given to all deliveries by the system, but we always deliver sooner than that. Then she tells me that my shift is over and I can go home. She'll deliver the food when she's done cleaning on her way home. If it were up to me, the client would have had the order delivered in 15 minutes. Now, for annoying my boss, they got it in 89 minutes after ordering, just under the promised 90. Honestly, as long as they display how long the time frame is going to be maximum for delivery, it's totally understandable if it actually takes that long to get there. In the times that I do order some kind of delivery, the only times it actually upsets me is when it takes longer than maybe half an hour and they don't ever show how long it's actually going to take. Or if they do, it's some unreliable estimate tucked far away in a corner that you're not meant to see. Now that is annoying. Our next story is by Woolran. You don't want me to come in? Sure. When I started working, I had a position in a laboratory supervising some devices. When I started, the devices we used were from the 90s and not that automated as new ones, but they were fairly easy to maintain and repair if you knew what you were doing. I later moved on inside the company, doing outside jobs with a better salary, but occasionally helping with the old devices as I knew them inside and out. Of course, I trained some of the new people who worked with my devices, but they were later replaced, etc. Important to know, this device could be filled with samples and the device would work through them without supervision, except to refill some fluids and refill samples. So the device could be working through the weekend and someone only had to check on it every 24 hours to refill. This was great, as we were often under time pressure and sometimes there were even penalties for finishing projects late. Years after I left that post, I was called on a Saturday by the son of the owner who tried to refill the device, but noticed some sort of problem. The actual operator at that time was also there, but unable to find out what the problem was. I was at my in-laws several hours away, and at that point, already some beers in, so no chance to get down there fast. Junior owner asked if I could tell what the problem was from his description. I was able to narrow it down, but not being there, I couldn't exactly tell what the problem was. I gave the operator some things to check, and a few hours later, she gave up, not able to finish repairing the device. At this point, I was fairly sure where the problem was located and what I would have to do. I asked the junior owner if I should come in Sunday evening to repair the device, and at least get it to run for the night to Monday. There was a project that needed to be completed because there was a penalty in place to finish late. I would stop by at my way home, no biggie. Junior owner, just having witnessed how long the operator had worked to finish nothing, declined. He thought I would come in on Sunday evening, which would mean double pay, with my increased salary, for a few hours just to be stuck again. I asked if he was sure, and he was. Fine by me, only meant more time with family on my weekend. Monday morning comes, and I come in, troubleshoot, put the device apart in something like half an hour, locate the faulty piece, put it back together, and just in an hour and a few minutes, the device is up and running just fine. The operator was flabbergasted as it had taken her 2 hours alone to pull it apart, only to not find the issue. Oh, and we didn't make the deadline, resulting in the company having to pay a nasty penalty just because junior owner didn't want me to come in on a Sunday. We worked it out though. He's actually a good guy. Just like his father, he was just a little inexperienced at this time. Well, to be fair, I don't think I can really blame the guy. Like OP said, they were just a little inexperienced. They didn't know OP would be able to come in here and fix it right up. You get a little less green, you get a feel for things. I'm sure going forward it was a lot more smoother. And our final story of the day is by Hurling Day. Just give me anything. Surprise me. I babysit for twin girls. When they were about 2, they would always fall asleep in the car coming home from our activities. Then they wouldn't nap once we got home. One day, I really wanted them to get their nap in. I figured if I went to a drive-thru and got them some fries, that would keep them awake till we got home. I went to the first fast food place I saw, a place I hadn't been to in years. I ordered some chicken tenders and french fries for the girls. Then I figured I should get myself something, so I asked for a hamburger. They asked which one. I said, I don't care, just give me a hamburger, surprise me. We got home, put the girls down for their nap, and sat down with my burger. I took one bite and had to spit it out. I opened the bun. Both buns were saturated in hot sauce and there was a dozen jalapenos that I counted on the burger. I laughed so hard. Serves me right. In all fairness to OP, who goes to a drive-thru and says, "Get me a burger, I don't care which one." If I was that drive-thru worker, I would be so confused. Depending on where you went, you can go from regular 1-patty hamburger to some ultra stack 4-patty cheese covered mega mountain thing. That's a risky proposition, just laying it in the drive-thru worker's hands like that. All non-conformances shall be written up. Longtime aerospace engineer here. Worked at most of the rocket launching companies at one point or another. One that shall remain nameless is involved in this story. My crew was stacking the satellite onto the booster adapter in the clean room, one of the most critical events. Dozens of customers and launch vehicle team involved. My butt hat manager that was never in the room during these ops made a big stink the morning that all non-conformances shall be documented. We had been having this argument for a while, and this was his flex. At the time, non-conformances were done online and involved digital sign-offs from some engineers that might be thousands of miles away in a different time zone. Could take a day or two sometimes. As the lead of the whole show, I argued that some common sense should be applied and I be allowed to show my engineering judgment. It's not my first rodeo. That's why I have the job, right? Nope. Fast forward a few hours and we're in the middle of this whole thing, satellite full of super hazardous fuel, hanging on the crane, halfway attached to the booster. One of my technicians notes that a small piece, 2 inches long, of aluminum tape is blocking a tiny screw hole that he needs to access. Normally I'd say, peel it off, clean the area, apply a new piece of tape 1/4 of an inch over where it should have been, and let's continue. A 2-minute delay at most. The system was a non-flight critical ground handling device that was to be removed in the next few days anyway. Enter malicious compliance. I call a halt. Loudly announce, we have a non-conformance and cannot proceed until resolved. This is very rare to do it this time. The customer freaks out and asks me what the freak is going on. We are stuck. Can't finish, can't go back to the stand, stuck on the hook with hundreds of gallons of hypergoals above us. Area has to remain on lockdown until resolved. I write the non-conformance and start the process. Manager blows up my phone. What's the problem? I reply, a piece of non-flight tape is in the way. He loses his stuff, calls a giant meeting with all the brass. All the VPs and such show up since they heard issues during spacecraft mate. Then I explain it's a piece of tape, and the uproar starts. Really? That's it? Making us look like idiots? Why would you do that? Boss told me to. Boom. Mic drop. I got my common sense shot calling privileges reinstated. If you were a veteran in a job you've been doing for a while, and you knew you had what it takes to call the shots when necessary, but you had some boss or some manager talking down to you, trying to babysit or micromanage you, would you give in to their demands and show them how ridiculous it is that they're asking you to do all of this formal stuff when you know you can do it very well on your own? Or do you think it's just part of the process, especially in the aerospace industry? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Snake Peterman. You want the product shipped next day air no matter the cost? Roger that. I work in wholesale distribution of building materials. I don't sell to the public. I only sell to established accounts. This is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, most of my customers are great people. We get along very well, occasionally even meet up outside of work, with some I've known 15+ years. There is a minority that can be annoying. Some only use me as a last resort, which is okay. I understand I'm not everyone's first call, but they treat me like dirt because they're usually frustrated they can't get said part from their preferred channels. Most of the time, they've tried 3 to 5 other sources, and if they don't have X item, chances are slim I'll have pallets of it lying around anyway. One such character that only uses me as a last resort is Mike. Mike is routinely in a bad mood because he's been told, "Sorry, we don't have that," at least a few times before calling me. He often gets irate when I don't have whatever uncommon part he needs ASAP sitting on the shelf waiting for him. One day Mike calls, and this is how it goes. "Hello, OP here. How can I help?" "OP, I need to get 4 replacement trim pieces for this part. The freaking contractor ordered it in the wrong finish." The contractor ordered it in the standard finish, this guy needed it in an obscure finish of course, and I need 4 of them yesterday. Please tell me you have them on the shelf. While I'm looking up the availability, he starts going on about how this is one of the most expensive projects he's worked on, and they have buckets of money, blah blah blah. At this point, I miraculously find the part in stock in my company, and I tell him it's probably a good thing they have buckets of money because this part's going to cost you, especially if you need 4 of them tomorrow. I do have these available, but they'll have to ship from the other side of the country. OP, I need these parts. Please just send them over for next day air delivery. I don't care. I say, Mike, let me at least get you a freight estimate. Shipping's gotten very expensive during the pandemic, and I don't like shipping something without you knowing a ballpark estimate. They say, OP, I told you I don't care what it cost. Get the parts on the way. I say, okay, Mike, I'll get them shipped today. Sure. Let me let you go because it's 3 p.m. and I need to get on the phone with that warehouse so they can force the order to print right away. So I order the parts just as Mike asked. These parts were 4 pieces. Ground shipping would have been 4 or 5 days and probably $25 each. Next day, air, $386 each. They weigh a decent amount, which makes anything going by air cost multitudes more. Shipping ended up costing almost as much as the product. I didn't hear from Mike for a few days. The product arrived as requested. He finished the job and got the contractor out of hot water. He didn't have time to wait on his bill to arrive in the mail, so he called me for the freight cost. OP, how much was the freight for that stuff last week? I say, let me pull it up. Looks like it ran $1,544 plus the cost of the product at $2,230. He says, you're freaking with me, right? I say, no sir. Overnight air shipping from across the country is very expensive. Can show you the bill from UPS if you'd like. Mike says, I told the contractor it would probably run $400. Jesus Christ, OP. I could have waited a day or two if I knew it was that much, blah blah blah. I had to cut him off mid-rant. Mike, I specifically asked you if you wanted an estimate. You declined. I don't know how else you could reasonably expect me to do. He pretty much mumbled some more choice words and got off the phone. Interestingly enough, he did start calling me a bit more after that, but he makes sure to note the pricing a bit more closely. All I know is if somebody's doing some kind of service that involves shipping and they say, hold on, you're gonna want to find out an estimate before you pay for this, I'd probably be wanting to stay on the phone and get that estimate because that definitely would be a big siren going off for me. Our next story is by Fuzzy Rugby. Sure, I'll take the new employee training again. Work a second job at an Amazon sort center. I quit on October 28th due to needing to do a COVID quarantine and HR not answering on putting me on a leave plan. If you go into negative leave time, Amazon cans you and you can't apply again until at least 90 days. Amazon's easy money for me, and I use it as an additional workout, throwing multiple thousands of packages in a 3 to 5 hour shift. You see why I wanted to keep the job for easy money. I applied back on October 29th and was technically starting back last night. I was offered a shift last Friday night and Sunday afternoon with an extra $3 an hour and took it. Worked 8 hours and then went back in last night at 8:30 p.m. for my first shift back. Learning told me I had to take the 9 hours of new hire education split between last night and tonight. All the staff know me and I'm literally getting paid to do nothing. I love using their loopholes against them. I also need to mention, I'm also getting their $3,000 signing bonus. You know, for a company that is working so hard to minimize any cost possible, it's kind of funny to see them just be so overlooking and wasteful in this situation. But I guess that kind of happens when you're such a mega company that things just slip by without people noticing or calling it out. Our next story is by Diligent Cockroach 700. I demand to see the manager. In the early 90s, I was made redundant from a large telecom company with a very generous payout. This allowed my wife and I to buy a florist shop. She was a trained florist, which has staff, including a manager. I got another job in IT, but used to help out in the shop on Saturdays as I enjoyed the work. One Saturday afternoon, just before closing time, an irate man came in complaining his flowers had been delivered late for his wife's birthday. I was the only one in the shop. The other 2 staff were busy out the back cleaning up and getting ready to close. I found the order and it had a note on it saying, "Deliver after 10 a.m." It had been delivered at 11:10. I told him that it was quite reasonable that we had delivered it then, as it was after 10 and no other stipulation had been made, so I felt his complaint was unjustified. He got quite aggressive and demanded to see the manager, so, grinning to myself, I went out the back and got her, staying out back myself to assist with clearing up. I could hear the guy trying to demand a refund. My manager told him it would have to be authorized by the owner. His face was a picture when she called me and I came back out. It would be great if OP came back out and was like, "Have we met? Hi, I'm the owner." I'd love to see if this guy just continues on demanding a refund or if they turn into like a bumbling fool. This next story is by Chic Your Booty, running out the clock. Back in my call center days, I worked the closing shift and was the only person who was authorized to take calls that were to be escalated to a supervisor. Per the client contract, we could not transfer any calls after the end of the day, 9 p.m. We could answer the calls that were queued prior to then, but no escalations or transfers could be made after it. One evening, an agent received a call from a dissatisfied customer who needed assistance installing the suite of applications we support. The application suite had about 7 or 8 apps bundled in it and could take up to an hour to install. The support techs were instructed that they could not stay on the phone for the full install, and once the installer got to a specific step, copying the files to the hard drive, they were to let the customer go with the advice to call back if any other errors occurred. This customer wanted the agent to stay on the line during the full install, and when the agent said they had to let them go, the customer wanted a supervisor. The escalated call came to me at 8:50 p.m. In preparation for the call, I flagged a different agent to get ready for a possible transfer so he could stay on the phone and assist the caller. I didn't like to have to do it because I wasn't authorized to leave until the queue was empty and all agents finished their calls. With everything prepared, I had the caller transferred to me and tried to explain that our standard procedure was to let the user go when we start the install process. But I could transfer her to a different agent with instructions to stay on the phone for the whole install. Hearing this, I was subjected to a non-stop circular tirade about the poor service the caller received, how user-unfriendly our products were, and questioning the training and education of all the techs, including myself. I tried interjecting whenever she paused in the conversation, but the caller would cut me off and resume ranting. Finally, she seemed to run out of steam and asked to be transferred to another agent. It was now 9:02. I had the displeasure of telling the caller that because our phone queues automatically close at 9 p.m., the end of our service day, I was unable to transfer her to another agent, and she would have to call back first thing tomorrow morning. This, of course, set her off anew, and I listened sympathetically as I could for the next 15 minutes before finally giving her the number to our corporate office. Honestly, working in a call center, I can imagine your time a lot of days is like, you got one customer chatting in your ear going off about something, and you glance up at the clock and you're like, just 15 more minutes, I gotta survive just 15 more minutes and I can get out of here. Honestly, I'd probably try to devise ways where I could sympathetically upset them enough to get them hanging up on me. I don't know how, but I'd probably figure it out if I had to deal with people like that for 8 hours a day. And our final story of the day is by XMintyX. Legal action if I don't delete my files? Okay then. I had a decent job, pay was weak, but it was easy and my team was really good with me. Then COVID happened and my manager colleagues lost sight that being a manager is a duty to serve your team and not a right to be power hungry. They'd post in chat cruel or nasty things about team members and fuel gossip. After witnessing this, I decided I want out and gave my manager the heads up I was leaving and then went on my leave. I was told that no job could accommodate my needs. I tried to swing my hours and stay working from home, and should be lucky to find better. This didn't go down well, and they slowly dissolved my department and made my team's life heck. I took a photo of the instant messenger and sent it to a colleague to whistleblow. Despite nothing to say the group I am was confidential, I got served with a cease, desist, and delete or legal action. Now, during COVID, I made many reports to make working from home a doddle. This was many Excel/Google Sheets docs that fed into one another, and access to policies. All that shebang. Things that people need on the fly. These were being used on the daily many times by multiple people. Well, okay. You want me to delete all the documents from home and my personal accounts? Not a problem. The next day, I had people asking where the reports had gone. I just watched it all unfold. The kicker, I found a job that gave me all I asked for and a pay increase. Lovely. From my experience, if you know you're good enough and you can do your job well, and your manager or your hirer or anybody, if they say, you'll never get what you're looking for out there, you'll never find another job better than this one, that's almost always just going to be a scare tactic to try to keep you right there in that job, and probably an attempt to get you to shut up and just be worker drone and do as they say. You cannot spend $50 on a haircut. When I worked as an engineer at a Canadian telecoms company, I was deployed for several months in Brazil. After 2 months at a hotel at the business area of Sao Paulo City, I urgently needed a haircut. Being the expensive business zone I was located, there was a haircut place next to my hotel, and I decided to walk downstairs to get the haircut there. They charged $50 US for a male haircut. I had to pay and left. When the accountant lady reviewed my expenses report, she said, "You cannot submit such an expensive haircut." Cue malicious compliance. 2 months later, I had to cut my hair again. I took a $25 taxi to a barber shop in a mall some kilometers away, cut my hair for $25, enjoyed the walk and had dinner, and went back on another taxi for $25, plus the 2 taxis I took earlier that day to go to the customer office. When the accountant lady asked why I took 4 taxis on the same day, my response was, "You told me I can't spend $50 on a haircut, so I had to look for a barber shop in a cheaper area of the city." She didn't bother me again. From all the stories I've heard in situations like this, these people are just fixated on the biggest numbers they can find and trying to get them as small as possible. Well, they were able to bring that number down, but there were just more of those lower numbers. If you were on a business trip and you got a $50 haircut and you got yelled at for it afterwards, would you feel any amount of guilt taking a taxi traveling around to get a cheaper haircut, knowing it's going to cost them even more money this time around? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Jake No Mistake. Want strict work hours? Okay, can do. I used to work in a mid-sized company in the engineering department. One of the managers started to get upset because if he walked around at exactly 8:30, our start time, everyone was not in their seats. He felt that engineers were being too lax with their time. The edict went out that all engineers had to be in their seats exactly at the start time. I told my boss that I was not planning on complying because I was a salaried professional and expected to be treated as such, and that if they didn't trust me to put in an honest week's work, then they should fire me instead of micromanage me. The older and much wiser engineers took a different approach. They all showed up 5 minutes early to make sure they were in their seats at 8:30, but also set an alarm for 5 p.m. and would literally drop everything they were doing exactly at 5 p.m. and leave the building. Is the manager having a meeting that was supposed to end at 5 but is running a little late? No. At 5 p.m. a series of alarms would go off and everyone would stand up in the middle of the meeting to leave. Does operations need technical support at 4:55? They have exactly 5 minutes on the phone with the engineer before he'll have to get off the phone. Is someone trying to discuss a work-related issue at 8:28? Better wait a couple minutes because no one in the engineering department is answering work-related questions for another 2 minutes. Needless to say, the policy didn't last very long. So from all the stories I've read, it appears the best strategy to take is that if they're gonna nickel and dime you with your start time and say you've gotta be doing this at exactly 8:30, you turn around and say, alright, but I'm working till 5 p.m. and not a minute later, because if I'm gonna be in here working exactly at 8:30, I'm gonna be leaving at exactly 5 p.m. You don't want to put that trust in me? Then I'm not going to hustle for you. Our next story is by Turn Your Phone Dummy. I want a Wi-Fi point and I don't care how you do it. Don't care, huh? I work as the lone IT guy at a school, and we had a new deputy principal start. People used to refer to him as the blue sky guy, meaning that he would say all these amazing things that are going to happen, but then don't do anything to set them in motion. Then of course, get angry when it doesn't happen. One day he says to me, I want a Wi-Fi point in my office. I said, well, there's one in the room next door, and I can see that you have full bars on your laptop, so there's no need for one. He of course did not like this and demanded that I install a Wi-Fi point in his office. The thing is, his office was tacked onto the side of the building a few years prior, and only had one network point that his desk VoIP phone was plugged into. Now, anyone who works in IT long enough can tell you that there is a second pass-through network port on the phone where you can plug in a network cable. But then I would also need a power injector to power the Wi-Fi point, and it would then be limited to 100 megabits per second instead of 1000 megabits per second. So, installing one in his office was not only unnecessary, but would also be slower for anyone who connected to it. I try to explain this all to him, and he just cuts me off. I want a Wi-Fi point and I don't care how you do it. So, cue malicious compliance. I screwed the Wi-Fi point to his roof, and ran the network cable down the wall and sticky taped the end of the cable to the back of his desk where he can't see. Sure, he had a Wi-Fi point, but it wasn't plugged into anything. About 1 year later, he said, I noticed that all the other Wi-Fi points have a light on, and mine doesn't. Oh, it's just that you have so many windows in here, it can be hard to see the light. He just left a few months later, and the staff threw a mini party. I then took the Wi-Fi point down and put it into storage. His replacement has not had any Wi-Fi issues in the past 2 years. I'm just gonna take a wild guess and assume this guy had no recollection of how internet or Wi-Fi or speeds worked. Somebody that's so stubborn and dead set that having a Wi-Fi point in the office is going to guarantee perfect connection, like OP eventually chose to do. Sometimes it's easier to just give them what they want, even though you know it's not the right thing. This next story is by Kookabanus. Get your poop off my property. In advance, this is not my personal story, but rather that of a friend of mine and his neighbor, retold with his kind permission. I'm also not very technically minded when it comes to electrics, so please bear with me and I shall explain as best as my layman's knowledge allows. So, I live not far from Milla in North Queensland up in the mountains and rainforest. On my property, I'm blessed with a strong mountain stream that never goes dry, and was perfect for a small hydroelectric setup to produce power for my house. Now, to place it on my property, I would only get a small head of water, meaning the hydro system would not be running at full capacity, and produce a lot less power than it was actually capable of. To ensure I was never left dry, I installed 2 hydro systems, which essentially meant I could now run everything as much as I liked. To burn off excess power produced, I mounted a row of heating elements from old hot water systems on the roof of my shed. I could not feed excess back into the grid, as apparently it's illegal to do this from hydro for some reason, but is apparently perfectly alright from solar panels. A pretty nice setup once complete, and apart from a very small amount of maintenance, I never paid a cent for power ever again. I was on very good terms with my downhill neighbor, and eventually we struck a deal to place the generators on my neighbor's property, where there would be a higher head from my weir, and the turbines would run at full power, easily providing enough electricity for both houses. So we poured a new cement slab for the generators, and ran a new feed pipe from my weir to the new generator site. Wired everything in and hey presto, free power all around. Everything was good for nearly a decade until my neighbor finally sold the place and moved south to be with his kids. At first, the new neighbor seemed okay. He'd been told about the power sharing arrangement, but apparently had not grasped the bit about the generators being on his property. They were down by the creek and in the forest, so it may not have been immediately obvious where they were located. Unfortunately, when he did discover them, he appeared to take it as a personal affront and came storming to my door one night. Why are there 2 bloody great machines on my place with a pipe coming from your place? I said, do you mean my hydro turbines? They say, is that what they are? Why are they on my property? I don't want them here. You need to get rid of them, or I will. I say, wait a minute, those turbines are where our power comes from. We can't just rip them out. He says, that's not my problem. I don't want your crap on my land. You have 1 week to move them, or else. The discussion went on some more as I tried to get him to understand why they were there and what they did, as well as the original deal to share power because of where they were. He was either too stupid or too rude to care, so I finally agreed to move them the next day. So the next morning, I shut off the drive pipe, disconnected the turbines, and loaded it all onto my ute. I then went to the original side of my property and reconnected the whole mess. Of course, I had to use the original wiring setup to connect them, which only supplied my house. In any case, there was now only enough power for one place anyway, due to the lower head supplying less pressure. All good, and my place had power again by the evening. My neighbor came home after work to a dark house and defrosting freezers and went mental. "Where the heck is my power? I'm supposed to get free power on my place. You can't do this." I say, as I repeatedly explained yesterday, the deal was you get power in return for me being able to site the generators on your property. Now that you force me to move them, you get nothing. In any case, they now can only supply enough power for one house because of their location. So I guess you're gonna have to sort something out for yourself. Neighbor stormed off to buy a petrol generator. In the coming week, he had an electrician in to do a quote to supply mains power to his house. Wasn't happy with that, as the house had been off-grid for a decade and would need extensive modifications to get back on grid. They would need to put a new pole on in his property at his expense, as well as a new fuse box, around $15,000. He then got a quote for his own hydroelectric turbine, but discovered he didn't have sufficient head on his property. The salesman suggested he talk to his uphill neighbor, me, to see if he could run a pickup pipe from that property. Guess who came to my door, cap in hand and very apologetic, to ask if I would mind putting the generators back on his place so he could have power. When I told him there was no way in heck I was going to do that, he asked if he could have permission to run a drive pipe from my where instead. I say, "Gee, I don't know if I want your crap on my land." I eventually let him do it, although I did make him sweat a bit first. However, there was a condition attached. If he ever made trouble with me again, that drive pipe was going to come out immediately. Haven't had so much as a peep from him since. This guy moves into the house, discovers on their property there's these giant machines they don't understand. Sure, fair enough, go to the guy and complain. But as soon as OP said, "This is what's giving your house power for free," should have ended there. This guy was obviously so narcissistic or argumentative, seeing red or whatever, that they wouldn't allow logic to actually process or get through to them. I've read a lot of stories about Karens who act very much this way. And our final story of the day is by Small of Two Pieces. You don't have any? Well, can you check in the back? This story is from years ago when I was the assistant to the retail manager of a small mom-and-pop swimming pool supply store. One of the many aspects of the job was inventory management. I did the ordering, and I would frequently audit the stock to see what was low, what we had, and make any adjustments in our computer for stuff that broke, was taken by our service department, expired, etc. I also had the displeasure of dealing with customers. It was the middle of summer, and as you might guess, it's the busy season for pools. I would typically work 60 plus hours a week with one day off. Frequently that day off would be a Sunday one week, then I wouldn't get another until the following Friday. So you can imagine that sometimes my patience was thin. The store is hectic and busy when a customer comes in looking for something. Specifically what, I don't remember, but we had none on the shelf. I apologetically told them we were out. Then they hit me with the classic, "Well, can you check in the back?" Remember when I said I was in charge of inventory? I knew we had none, and I told them I was sure we didn't have any. "Well, can you check anyway?" Cue malicious compliance. I put on my best customer service smile and say, "Sure, I'll check in the back in a few minutes." So I mosey on back to the stock room, knowing full well it's not there. I take my time and stroll through the stock, catch my breaths from the business of the floor, and enjoy the peace and quiet of the stock room, where there's no customers for just a little bit. Then I head back into the chaos of the store and smile apologetically again to the customer. "No, sorry, there's none back there." The customer thanked me for checking and left disappointed, but at least I got a couple minutes to myself. Honestly, working in retail can probably be a very tiring thing. If somebody excuses themselves to the back and just kind of takes a breather in there for 5 minutes or so, I feel like honestly, every once in a while it's kind of understandable. I mean, really, there must be only so much you can take with all these people coming through. You probably deal with Karens. You work at a pool supply store, so there's probably people bringing in weird, murky containers of this and that. Do you have this pool toy? How do I fix my water? What do I do with this? I imagine that can get old pretty quickly. Oh, you want to prove you're allergic to the vaccine? Okay, now you're fully vaccinated. So I'm a doctor in New Zealand, currently working in immunology. Our country recently, like today, introduced a policy where you need to show a vaccine pass to be able to access hospitality or retail stores. To get this vaccine pass, you either need to be fully vaccinated or have a legitimate medical exemption. As I just started working in immunology, I have a weekly allergy clinic. I had a woman referred into me who we shall call Karen, who had reportedly had a reaction to the first vaccine dose. We take that very seriously, and there was a strong possibility that she could receive an exemption from the second dose or subsequent booster shots, depending on the nature of the reaction. However, it became clear within the first few minutes of the consult that this woman had not had a serious reaction to the vaccine. She was not telling me any of the symptoms she experienced and just kept referring to the reaction. Even direct questioning was getting nowhere. However, after a frustrating 10 minutes, I was able to rule out a severe allergic reaction or a possible cardiac event, the two major concerns for the Pfizer vaccine. During the course of the consult, it became obvious that Karen was more interested in grandstanding about the vaccine than in actually receiving medical care. She accidentally let slip that getting a vaccine exemption would benefit her politically, whatever that meant. She also let slip that she was against vaccines in general and was trying to prove a point. I offered her an alternative vaccine, the AstraZeneca, which she vehemently refused due to risk of blood clots. So I explained what the standard procedure is to confirm a serious allergy. It's called a challenge. Basically, we give the patient the thing they might be allergic to. If they react, we have all of the necessary care with experts on severe allergy right there. This is in a major hospital. And if they don't have a reaction, we know you aren't allergic. I explained it by saying, we give you the shot and see what happens. If you have a reaction, I'll happily write you an exemption for the booster. She agreed to this, signed the consent form after I went through it in detail. I gave her the vaccine, and she promptly had a seizure. I put that in quotation marks because it was the least convincing seizure I have ever seen. I've seen drug addicts trying to score benzos in the emergency department having more convincing seizures. I'm not even willing to call it a pseudo-seizure, it was that terrible. She literally laid down, didn't fall, she actually laid slowly on the ground, and started flopping like a fish while periodically looking at us to make sure we were watching. I've never seen anything like it. Her vitals were all completely normal, blood was completely normal, everything was fine. After she had recovered, Reed got tired and gave up. My boss, who had taken over by this point because of how bizarre it was, explained to her that she did not have a reaction to the vaccine, was kind enough to call it a pseudo-seizure, which is essentially a seizure-like event caused by a psychological trigger rather than physical that to the patient feels like a real seizure but is not typically dangerous. He informed her that she would not be receiving an exemption. That resulted in much yelling and shouting until I calmly informed her that she didn't need an exemption as she was now fully vaccinated. She received the first dose prior to being sent to our clinic, and we gave her the full second dose during the challenge, so she was covered. The look on her face was absolute gold. She then proceeded to declare that she had not consented to being vaccinated, she had in writing, and that she refused to accept that she was vaccinated. She was, and that we were trying to prevent her from claiming to be unvaccinated. We weren't. She then stormed out of the clinic when I gave her a "I'm fully vaccinated" sticker, which we normally give out after a second dose. I kinda got in a tiny bit of trouble for that bit, but it was so worth it. It was an entertaining afternoon. If you were a doctor in a situation where the patient claims to have something that they don't have, you watch them literally lay down on the ground and flop around like a fish, would you get a kick out of just standing there watching them, waiting for them to finally stop and get back up? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by Chainsmoker Magic. Don't speak Spanish in front of you? Okay. How about French? No? Maybe German? So this is an interaction I observed in a convenience store the other day. It was a busy day, so there was a bit of a line, and behind me was a couple speaking Spanish to each other. My Spanish is not the best, but I understand enough to overhear them being cute and flirty with each other. Kinda made me smile because, ain't love grand? Enter Karen, standing behind them in line. Obnoxiously large sunglasses, the classic haircut and red lipstick on her teeth. Probably mid-40s, she gets into the line and immediately starts looking visibly annoyed. She grunts and sighs audibly, prompting the boyfriend from the Spanish-speaking couple to turn around. "Hey, is everything alright?" he said in perfect English. Karen gives him a look that could peel paint from the walls and says, "Oh, I'm fine. I just wish people had better standards for themselves. You know, speaking Spanish in public makes you seem uneducated, right?" Now, my knee-jerk reaction upon overhearing this was to turn around and tell this lady where she can stick it, but the boyfriend beat me to it. As soon as she said uneducated, the dude's face inexplicably lights up like a Christmas tree. He smiles at her and immediately turns to his girlfriend and starts saying something in French. The girlfriend responds to him also in French. He turns back to Karen and says, "Is that better?" At this point, I'm giggling to myself because darn, this was great, but it's not over. Karen stares at the guy, mouth agape, completely speechless. "No? How about this?" he asks, and turns to his girlfriend and asks her something in what's clearly German. The girlfriend laughs and responds, also in German. Now, I don't speak French or German, but really I didn't need to. This was comedy gold. At this point, I'm just busting out laughing. Karen and the other people in line saw me, so I just turned to the boyfriend and simply smiled at him, and then turned to Karen and let off a, "Darn, he told you." I had paid for my stuff by then, and I leave as I hear the girlfriend ask, "So how many of those languages are you educated in?" Wish I stayed around to see the end of the interaction. From the moment the dude spoke French, Karen's face was just priceless. But I'd already interjected with some smart buttness, and confrontations really aren't something I'm looking for in my life. Besides, these two didn't need anyone's help. This really gives you a look into Karen's mindset. For some reason, this Karen seems to think anybody that can speak Spanish means they're less educated. I love that this couple turned around and just showed up this Karen and left that Karen just mouth gaping there. Maybe after that point, the Karen wasn't educated enough to construct an actual sentence. This next story is by the doomed hero. New army captain tries to end her career. I used to be an armorer in the US Army. I was the person in charge of securing and maintaining all the weapons. I was stationed overseas at a base that only had one arms room, and I was the guy who ran it. So instead of just being responsible for the weapons in my unit, I was responsible for all the weapons in the entire post. On paper, that's a job that's supposed to be done by an E6 with a 2-person support staff. In reality, the position was chronically short-staffed. It was just me, as an E4, doing the job of 3 people. Because the position was critical to the operations of a bunch of different units, including things like PSYOPs and Special Forces, where everything about them is classified by default, and joint operations with the Navy and Air Force, and a few foreign militaries who were working with the US, I had to get a security clearance that was higher than everyone else in my own unit. As far as I knew, there were only 4 other people on the post with clearance high enough to do what I did, and they were all officers. This led to some amusing situations where I was accidentally called for security briefings that were way above my pay grade. That sucked because I was on call all the time and had to go to work anytime anyone needed a weapon. Being on call was supposed to be a duty rotation, but I was the only one who could do it, so I slept in the arms room a lot. I wanted to make sure I had as little to do as possible, so I got very good at my job. How good? During an army-wide review of the entire supply chain, my post was found to be the best run arms room in the entire army. I won a medal and everything. Then we had a change in command, and the new captain hated that I didn't have to go on training exercises because I wasn't allowed to be more than 30 minutes away from the arms room ever. The compliance, the new captain was absolutely determined to take me on a training mission. She'd somehow gotten it into her head that I was a slacker, which I absolutely was, but only because I was efficient and pissed off that I never got to leave the base. So she drew up a bunch of paperwork to sign the arms room over to the supply sergeant. I refused to sign because the person with all the ammo and the person with all the guns are supposed to be different people. Next, she tried to sign the arms room over to the PSYOPs company commander. I refused to sign because that commander had become a friend of mine, so I knew he was required to leave the base weekly for security briefings. Finally, she tried to sign the arms room over to our company's supply lieutenant. I tried to explain that the lieutenant didn't have a high enough security clearance, but she cut me off. She said she was tired of my excuses. Then she ordered me to sign and threatened me with an Article 15. I wrote under duress on the paperwork. She didn't even look at the signature, so I sent an email to the warrant officer who was in charge of logistics for the area. He was the guy who'd given me the award I mentioned earlier, so he was pissed when he found out what was going on, and went on the crappy little weekend training exercise and basically enjoyed my vacation. That sequence of events happened on a Friday afternoon. The chief didn't get my email until Monday morning. On Monday afternoon, my captain was relieved of command. I eventually had to testify at our disciplinary hearing. My second favorite part of the whole experience was the supply lieutenant who got a slap on the wrist for inadvertently obeying illegal orders because he hadn't learned the regulations before signing, saying, "Is it like that for you all the time? This has to change." My favorite part was the full-bird colonel in charge of the hearing asking my former commander, "Your soldier was awarded for being the best at his job in the entire army. After he refused your orders the first few times, why didn't you start asking questions?" I think the greater question that they should have asked is something broken? Sure, they can be annoyed that you're not going out anywhere or traveling or doing other things, but if everything you're doing is keeping things running smoothly, why would they care so much? Our next story is by TalYYR0. Save up to 15% on your water bill by shafting the unhoused today. I work for a Canadian harm reduction clinic run by a big non-profit. We have 2 gigantic laundry machines down here for towels from our shower program and clothing donations. Because the clinic budget comes from the government and the building budget comes from the non-profit directly, he forbade us from doing the client laundry because it runs up the building's water bill. And we ain't paying for that. Like even just once or twice for someone who's sleeping in the literal dirt and mud and snow, still a no. So now I tell clients that since we can't wash their clothing for them, they may as well donate it to us. I launder to put it out and lo and behold, there's a client right here who just gave away all their clothing and has nothing to wear. So I distribute the now warm and clean donations I just received from them back to them. Suck a doink, boss. Honestly, the management here is so asleep at the wheel, I'd be floored if he ever actually notices the water use. It's been 2 months since his declaration, and I'm just still quietly doing my daily end run around my boss to help folks. I think if you just boil it down to basic human decency, that's the right thing to do. Good on OP. And our final story of the day is by some weirdo in SA. Insist I announce every time I have to pee? No problem. So this was a few years ago, after just receiving a promotion at my previous company and working under a new supervisor, who we shall from here on call Karen. This is one of many altercations between us, but the only one that contains malicious compliance from my side. This was a desk job position, which also had customers calling to schedule services or repairs on their warehouse machinery. Out of proactiveness, I would discreetly tell the person that sat next to me if I were going to the loo, in case my phone rang so that they could take a message. This had worked fine for a few months, with no issues until one day. Karen usually had varying moods, and this day was a bad mood day. Nonetheless, I continued doing my stuff, keeping my head down and whatnot. I let my neighbor know I'm headed to the bathroom and make my way. Out of curiosity, I used to time my loo breaks, and I was never away from my desk for longer than 3 minutes. I walked back into the office and had not even sat down yet when this exchange happened. Karen shouting, "Where the heck have you been?" Me, already pissed at her tone of voice, say, "I was peeing, why?" Karen says, "You should tell people when you're not going to be at your desk. I'm tired of picking up your calls. Call this person back and see what they want." They hand me a note. Me, noticing my neighbor was not at her desk, I say I had told neighbor where I was going. Karen says, "Well, you have to tell me too. I need to know where you are if I'm going to be answering your calls." Me, already hatching my malicious compliance plan with a huge smile on my face, say, "Okay, no problem. I'll do so in the future." It was this day that I decided I should really start looking after my health and make sure I get in my 8 glasses of water a day. So the next day I arrived with my 500 milliliter water bottle, knowing I would need to finish the bottle 4 times before the workday ends. I was going to the bathroom about hourly, and each time I would stand up, walk to her table, wait if she was on a call, then politely tell her, "I'm going to go pee now," with the biggest smile on my face. and then go. After about a few weeks of this, she eventually cracked. Karen very loudly said, "Why do you keep telling me when you need to pee? I don't want to know your internal schedule," as if she had forgotten her outburst a few weeks prior. I say, "You said I had to tell you if I were going to the bathroom a few weeks ago." Karen, remembering the incident, said, "Well, I didn't mean to tell me each time. As long as someone knows where you are if your phone rings." Me, smiling still, say, "Sure, I'd rather do that then." Cue the new malicious compliance plan, just to make sure this issue never gets brought up again. From now on, each time I had to use the bathroom, I would announce it in the office as I stand up. "I'm going to the loo in case my phone rings." My colleagues all smirked the first time I did this, and they all started following my lead and announcing loudly whenever they went to the bathroom. This continued for the following 3 years that I still worked there. New hires thought it was just protocol and did it without question. This announcement did work in everyone's favor though, because en route to the bathroom was a different department's office that we would often have to hand paperwork to. So whoever was going to the bathroom would usually ask if there was anything needed to drop off at that department on the way. And before I get people accusing me of possibly being a slacker, and that being the reason the supervisor was on me the whole time, I was one of the hardest working employees at that company and got 4 promotions in the 5 years I worked there. Karen was a witch to everyone. See, what I think Karen was really after was cutting down on the amount of bathroom breaks. It might have also been influenced by them just being annoyed having to help out a little bit more, but I personally do have a suspicion that this Karen just would prefer if everybody stayed at their desks the entire day. But OP ain't gonna let that stop them. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.